And we're live. Hello and welcome. This is the 19th episode of Game Theory Gang. I'm your host, Maddie Allen. We have co-host, the validator himself, David Feeder. And we have a really special guest tonight. Jack Levin is an early ex-Googler, employee number 21. He was an infrastructure engineer. I think a server that he built is in a museum. He made a successful company called Image Shack, which peaked at the number 11 website in the world. And it's still in the top 200 out of 2 billion sites now. He also bought Bitcoin at $1 and sold the $30 top that Richard Hart is known for buying. And you also said you've acquired some HEX among your crypto portfolio. You're interested in longevity. And you were able to speak at the first PulseConference.online that we just had. So I wanted to thank you for being here tonight again and making yourself available.
Thank you, guys. I feel very honored to hang with you and to talk to you. And also the PulseChain Conf online was super fun. Really just happened spontaneously, and I actually didn't even expect to talk to Richard. So I kind of wanted to make it fun, ask him to blow things up. To see what he would do. So we'll see. Maybe we can, create more outrageous elements in his marketing by acquiring things and then discarding them in huge explosions.
I think that there are a lot of angles to marketing that haven't necessarily been explored fully, and one of the things that I want to point out to everybody is Jack, you've been doing a really awesome job going on lots of different HEX streams. And that's one of the most important things, as you know, to the HEX community is outreach and education and cross promotion. And so I want to take a moment to draw everybody to the show notes in the description below. I've got a list of every stream I've found where Jack streamed with a hexakin. So we've got PulseConference.online, Crypto Coffee 369. There was the Twitter Spaces that you did with Richard Hart versus the Bitcoiners and the NFT guys that I uploaded to Apple Podcast. There's a link to that. You streamed earlier today with CoreyCosta. I thought that was an amazing interview. You streamed with CryptoHartBeat and GymRatCrypto.
Yeah. Great guys. Everyone had a very, very different vibe. I really liked Corey. He was very, very down to earth. I like the GymRats guys. They have like the best intro and I guess the best outro as well. It was super fun to engage with all of the influencers or aspiring influencers. So it was great to meet them.
Awesome. Yeah. So, there's a lot of topics that we can talk about tonight. I also kind of want to bring some attention to my co-host here, David Feeder, because he's not only known as somebody who is playing an altruistic role in the PulseChain space by being a validator and running equipment at a loss because he wants to pay forward his HEX gains, I think you've said, David. But David also is known in the HEX community for making the best testimonial video of all time that many of us have seen and that Richard Hart describes as his favorite of all time. Would you guys mind if I shared that with the audience here real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see that.
Oh, geez, you're dragging this old thing up. Oh,
is that okay, David?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a part on the hex.com website called it's hex.com/testimonials, and so David is featured here on the website.
And just for context,
Richard,
like October 2020. And this is the day that HEX hit a penny for the first time ever.
Wow.
Tell me if this is too loud. I'm not sure how to adjust it.
And my name is David Feeder, and I just wanted to make a quick video and say thank you from the bottom of my heart. You've changed my life. And getting a little emotional. Yeah, I mean, I've been watching your videos for many years now, before HEX was even launched, back when you were talking about it. And, you know, everything you said has been 100% correct, 100%. And it's been a wild ride, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'm a hardcore Hexican. I'm an IT guy, nerd by trade, hacker. And I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you. From me to you, thank you personally. Gratitude can't express how I feel. You really changed my life, my family's. Thank you. Thank you for that. You know, that's amazing. The opportunity you've given everybody. And it really, you know, I 100% sympathize with you and love your videos when you tell it like it is, and you know, you deserve the respect that you've earned from what you've done. And it's amazing what you've invented, and they don't get it. They don't understand. They have no idea, and they'll learn soon. They'll figure it out. But a lot of us now's the time when a lot of people should be onboarded, and now's the time to tell everybody. So, you know, it's already changed my life, but this is just the beginning. I mean, now that we're even just at a penny, that's the beginning. That's which is, I mean, even a year ago when I first got, like, I've been there since the beginning. And man, even in my mind, a penny was like a target. So we're about to hit that, and that's already life changing. And I'd love to share my story of a $750 investment in a single wallet. That now at a penny, I've paid off my student loans, and it's changed my life. And I have more HEX than that, and I've invested a lot, and I've got, you know, I'm ready for the ride, and you know, I've picked the right horse. So I just want to say thank you, just thank you, thank you.
Well, that's great. That's I'm sure very validating for Richard to hear that.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, that was a private message I sent him kind of that night. I kind of broke down and couldn't take it anymore. And yeah, just wanted to express my gratitude to Richard. You know, and it's a true story. You know, that HEX really changed my life. And now, over the past 2 years, I think it's done that for thousands of more people. You know, last 9 months we've had some downward price action, but you know, there's still a lot of folks who are still in profit to this day. And for the new people who have just joined in the last 9 months, you know, this 90% discount is a great opportunity to, you know, kind of replicate that success, you know?
Yeah, well, blockchain and value encoded on blockchain is just fascinating story. Just I feel like there's so much future in it, and it's super exciting. And what I really like about HEX is that it educates people how to really think of what blockchain really is. So that was how I got originally attracted to it. Because not every coin out there is actually creates the sort of a community that's pro education and pro transparency and pro on chain. So, and that was very fresh to discover.
Yeah, that's a good point. Go ahead, Matty.
I think our community, well, at least from my perspective, we're still having our growing pains and still learning, you know, what are the things that we stand for? What, you know, what are the ways that we can take crypto and make it more than just about getting rich? Because I think we can all agree that a lot of other tokens out there are simply feeding money into marketing machines that don't really have a kind of as much of an underlying, I'm not sure what you want to call it, like doesn't have the same properties as HEX. And I think that there are also emergent properties of HEX that those of us who have been studying it, and I know from my perspective, having a psychological background where I was trained in a lot of different integrative approaches, that that there are some major things that I'm seeing that I want to promote as, how can we improve mental health in crypto is kind of the thing that I see kind of in both of you, being interested in longevity, being interested in HEX. And I was wondering if you guys don't mind, if I can kind of maybe have a dialogue and back and forth with you, and you guys can give me feedback about this concept of HEX as a longevity technology in its current form even. But to illustrate this point, I want to share my screen one more time, and this is going to be interesting, because this is a story that many are familiar with. Greg Schoen posted this on Twitter back in 2011. And for those of you just listening and not looking at the screen, it says, "I wish I had kept my 1700 BTC at 6 cents instead of selling them at 30 cents. Now that they're $8, hashtag Bitcoin." This went viral, from time to time over the years, because it illustrates how, how rich people could have gotten in Bitcoin if they had held longer. And I'd love to kind of start off this line of thinking by asking Jack, what was it like holding Bitcoin in the early days? What was the community like? What can you share from that experience?
Well, I would say when I first started to mine it, I didn't really think much about it. I mean, it was a new thing that had value. It was no different than like a trading card that's digital, or like a Pokemon that happened to be online and somehow have value. So there wasn't a thought in my mind that it could become so much more than it was. For me, it was basically this: I had space in the data center, I had equipment that was sitting idle, that was not turned on, and I had excess power that I figured if I were to mine Bitcoin and it has any value, then at least I will reduce my data center bill, because I prepay for my power, and I just had power hanging off the ceiling or from under the floor. And so what I did is I just rolled in some servers, installed some video cards, started mining, later joined some pools, and started making Bitcoin, essentially, out of thin air. But I understood that it is, you take economic energy, which is the cost of power and the cost of your equipment, and you convert it to something valuable and cannot be replicated because you hold the keys. So that was kind of interesting. And over the years, I don't think I actually ever converted Bitcoin for the purposes of paying for the data center. It was the original thought. But the way that I have spent the Bitcoin is that I would say every time I would go to lunch with my friends, I would help them to install the wallet on their Android devices or iOS device, or anywhere they could install the wallet, and I would just give them Bitcoin. So I would give them between 5 to 10 to 15 Bitcoins every time I would go to lunch. And so that was my thing. And again, when it started to pump, and I think the first really big cycle, it went to $2,000. And it kind of got my attention back onto it, where I've held quite a bit of Bitcoin even then. And I started to look at the various technologies like ASIC mining and to see what's happening in the space. And I think on TV they were saying, here's a black box that's making money just by being plugged in. And it sounded really cool. So I purchased my first miner and I installed it in my office. And yes, it started to work. It was amazing that that miner was basically running an equivalent of 1,000 video cards at a fraction of the power consumed. So that was very interesting. Just continued to play with the various miners, installed some of them in the data center space, mined some more, but ultimately, my goal really was just to introduce people to blockchain and give as much Bitcoin out as I could, just to introduce people to value that can exist on blockchain. So that was my original thought. So I never really planned to become wealthy by holding Bitcoin. That wasn't really part of my plan. And I guess one of the reasons is that I did pretty well at Google when Google went IPO. So I didn't really think how to make more money on top of the money I already have. And so to me, it was just an interesting technology that had interesting economic implications. And overall, it just was amazing that, I mean, we all know that Bitcoin code is pretty crappy. And actually, I looked at the first Bitcoin miner. I looked at every line and I could see, that is basically slapped together as a proof of concept. And yet it actually did have economic value. So that was super interesting. And so I started to read some white papers on various other things. And obviously, we know where we're coming from and where we are today. So Ethereum was born. That became even more interesting. And so basically, my engagement in that space was from 2011 until now. And in 2011, the way that I got introduced to it, I just was having lunch with my Google friends, and they were making fun of Bitcoin, saying, "Oh, this silly thing, you can probably buy some bazookas or grenades with it because nobody can track it. It's supposed to be super secure and anonymous and this and that." And that was my first introduction into it. So I went to Reddit, read more about it, installed some wallets, and started mining, and the rest is history.
You were always looking for different ways to get fired for doing something innovative, huh?
Well, since I was working for myself, it was impossible to be fired.
Okay. And
yeah. So I quit Google in 2005, right? And from 2005 to 2011, I was running my startup, ImageShack.com. So it was at ImageShack's data centers where I was running the miners. The office that I was leasing for the company office, the corporate office, the landlord did complain that we have consumed an incredible amount of kilowatts, and they don't know what we're doing, and there aren't that many people in the office. What exactly is happening? They were asking. But the reality was that the cost of electricity was included in the flat fee or flat lease dollar amount every month, and so electric bill was basically non-existent. So I'm like, oh hey, free electric circuits. Why don't I just plug in some miners at the office as well and start to mine? And they came over and they complained. They're like, guys, come on, maybe turn off the lights at night. We didn't tell them that we're mining Bitcoin, and I don't think they would have understood anyway.
That is one of the benefits of working in IT.
Rendering images, yeah. And what was the magnitude of your wealth when you started to get involved with Bitcoin?
I'm sorry, what was one?
The magnitude of your wealth.
The magnitude. How do you measure the magnitude?
Well, were you a 100 millionaire, a billionaire? Were you a multimillionaire? You had scoped out, places to work based on being able to get stock options, and you were super early in Google. And so maybe it's too personal of a question.
Well, I was broke to begin with because I didn't even have a car. I had to take train to Google. And eventually I scrapped enough money to buy myself a scooter, one of those Vespas. It was a $2,000 purchase, and I would ride it across Sunnyvale to the Google office. So that was my beginnings. And I worked really hard. I really liked Google, and I felt that was very impactful at the company. And when it became super valuable, I felt like it was well-deserved because I have spent so many hours in the data center. I was literally the only network engineer for just a couple of years, just carrying the network on my shoulders with a pager taped to my head.
Oh man, and you were the only guy on the team
for a couple of years. And
for Google, that's insane.
Well, here's the thing. I did pretty good job and things were not going offline. So they thought that my workload is really not that big of a deal. I don't actually need to have anybody else to join my team. And then eventually I'm like, listen, guys, there's 3 data centers out there and they're all geographically dispersed. I'm only one person. You realize I'm becoming a single point of failure. and they're like, "Yeah, we understand. Let's hire some people to help you to work with." And so the first two guys that got hired, that I helped hire for my team, one of them was the one who introduced me to Bitcoin, actually.
Oh,
So
nice.
if it wasn't for him, I would not even potentially be in that space in the way that I am today. So
your origin story in crypto and in the technology and I would say like all of your origin stories are really inspiring. And I'd encourage people to go check out the other streams that Jack has done to learn more, because I've certainly enjoyed like hearing those stories.
I have a question going back to that time regarding Bitcoin.
sure.
If we went back to 2012, 2011, and someone were to ask you back then, how much will this Bitcoin be worth? What do you think you would have said back then? Before, what was your sentiment in the beginning as far as value of Bitcoin? Did you have any idea it would go this high? Because I didn't.
It was
in
actually very
Bitcoin, but-
negative. I thought that
Really?
it would be going to zero as soon as it makes any news or any waves. I figured that the government will find a way to shut it down. So that's what I thought, and that's what I told people. I'm like, hey, here's some Bitcoin. You can play with it. Maybe you can keep it. But what I personally think is that thing is not going to go anywhere, just because the government will not allow the fiat currency to be threatened by some sort of alternative store of value. What I didn't realize at the time is that Bitcoin was really a global phenomenon, and that not a single government could potentially organize the rest of the world to turn it off.
Yeah. Once it was distributed enough, it couldn't be stopped, right?
Yeah, and if you think about it, so mining in the United States had this one type of economic impact. Now, mining somewhere like in Kazakhstan or in China had something different entirely. I'm sure electricity costs less in certain other countries where they don't have that much of a population, or they can generate electricity from geothermic reactions, and they have a lot of hydro, and the cost of labor is actually not that much. And so what is obvious is that the world was adopting Bitcoin much quicker than I anticipated, because my view was country centric. So I figured that's a United States phenomena. But then, as I was perusing the forums and talking to people on Reddit, some of them hardly spoke any English, I kind of figured out, okay, this thing is actually a global thing. And that was part of the allure of keeping the value somewhere on the network that's global. And you travel with something that you own. You can be anywhere, you can cross any borders, and nobody can ask you what you have on you, because technically it's not on you, it's part of the blockchain. You just have access to the value that is stored in the blockchain's ledger.
That's a really powerful use case. We of course, that's not the first thing we recommend for people to back up their seed words only in their head, but you can see the power of the technology when you illustrate it that way. That and certainly anybody who has like crossed borders before, that it's that, and if you've studied history, people haven't always been allowed to have any form of sovereign money, and so that digital money, that Bitcoin and programmable monies that have come from that, that they possess this quality of maybe not full immutability, but they have certain properties that we don't see in physical forms of money. I think that's really interesting.
Well, it definitely does cross the borders, right? In terms of the economy, economic support, like, so to speak. So, like, especially in the third world countries, the cryptocurrency value is supported by everybody else out there, right? So I can see how it is so much more impactful somewhere where the country does not have the status of the reserve currency.
Mm-hmm.
And even on a network level as well, on an actual technology, even if you're in China, for example, Like they have the Great Firewall of China. A lot of Bitcoin nodes are actually run through the Tor network, or the like the Tor onion router. Some people call it the dark net, or but basically it's just a form of encapsulation and encryption.
It's a peer-to-peer internet that has its own web service structure.
Yes. Yep. So even that way too, for even if some governments try to block certain ports or they look for certain types of traffic, there's ways to even get around that. So it really is global. Even in countries where they try to ban it, that's hard for them to really do.
Yeah. So ability to store the economic energy that you have acquired by being useful to the world online and be transparently stored in a way that the transactions can be confirmed, and you have full custody, self-custody of something that you value is amazing. So I think that concept in itself is just incredible.
To take it one step further, one of the things I like about HEX when it comes to custody is I can protect myself from myself by decreasing my counterparty risk with my future self by sending HEX to the future. When I time lock it, then there's these draconian penalties for ending the stake too early. Jack, are you familiar with the rules that are written into the HEX contract that determine like the early end stake penalties?
Yeah. Basically, you can lose your principal essentially. So it makes no sense to unstake because there's no point. And of course, there's a declining penalties over time, and obviously there's a benefit to staking for the time that at least that you promised to stake.
So one of the experiments that I'm running right now is, for the past couple of years, I've accumulated these cold storage coins. Basically what it is it's a fireproof wallet that comes in the form of I think a copper 1 ounce coin. It's got the private key engraved on it underneath a tamper evident seal. And this is not something that people should use to store great amounts of wealth or anything. But when I gift people HEX, I don't just gift them liquid HEX that then is going to sit around for a long time waiting to appreciate in value and be diluted by the inflation of HEX. But I gift people staked HEX oftentimes for 10 or 15 years. And then another method that I use is to basically, in order to stake it, I enter the private key into my computer to where I can load the stake. I can so when I hand it to them, it's already ready to go. But then I also retain access because I these people that I'm gifting it to, family, friends, new people I meet, that kind of stuff. They're likely to lose it, of course. And so me kind of keeping that private key loaded in my secure setup and everything that allows me to not only have a backup, but to manage all of the airdrops that have been coming through, so that because at this point, if I had to call all the people that I gifted stake HEX to, be like, hey, now you have Pulse Dogecoin. That's worth like $400 today. By the way, there's 8 more days to claim it, everybody. Get out there and claim your, don't go connecting to any website with a supposed airdrop, but in HEX, in the HEX community, we have a system of people checking to see if a potential airdrop is safe or not to connect to. Of course, I don't want to take responsibility for your security, and so there's always going to be that disclaimer. But when people go to t.me/pulse police, you can look up the different airdrops and whether there are any red flags identified by the team of volunteer devs that look into things. And that's been the second most valuable airdrop. well, it actually depends on how much you had staked. Even wallets where I gifted people like $20 of HEX, some of those got more money airdropped to them, even if they just only got 25 Pulse Doge. And then the other one he drawn was for people who had a little bit more staked was the most valuable airdrop that has already kind of gone away a little bit, but keeps paying out. Anyway, we could cover that in other streams, but I guess the thing that I wanted to get to though is that I think gifting people stake HEX is a little bit different of an experiment, because if the price were to appreciate greatly, those people would still be able to hold on to the mad gains. And Jack, I'm just curious about what you kind of see, that how valuable you see that mechanic, given that Greg Schoen did not become a billionaire or a multimillionaire from buying Bitcoin at 6 cents, and other people did. And what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, so I actually have a pretty cool story. So my dad, in 1998, I opened an E-Trade account for him, and it was his IRA retirement account. So he asked me what stock to buy, and he invested $5,000 into Amazon. And then what happened is that because his English is not amazing, apparently that account was like split into two, and it became the regular trading, and then there was the IRA account, and he lost track of it for about 20 years, maybe actually longer than that, like 22 years. So eventually he called E-Trade just to get some accounts figured out to pay taxes on. And they said, oh, by the way, we have another account for you that you haven't logged in over 20 years. Maybe you should check it out. And so he logs into this account, and there's like a little bit under $1 million in that account. 5,000 became almost 1 million. And the moral of the story here is that, yes, it was Amazon. Yes, it was completely random. And I didn't even expect Amazon to be like super amazing. I mean, wouldn't really matter to me because I didn't have any money back then. But he did, and he put his 5,000, and now he has retirement money. And all he had to do is forget that he had that account. So I think a lot of people are thinking, were they the holders of Bitcoin back in the day when it was between $1 and $3 or a couple of cents? Maybe they should somehow develop amnesia and wait a couple of decades and see what happens. And the thing about the human mind is it's kind of very, very tricky. It's very difficult to predict the future and actually understand what may be happening, because we have all kinds of biases, and we have a lot of confirmation biases. Like if I don't like the government, I'm going to meet with people who don't like the government either. Or if I love the government, it's going to be completely opposite, and we're going to live in our own mental siloed universes. So if I were to believe that Bitcoin or crypto is not going to have any value, then I would see the confirmation everywhere, and I would be selling it at any point I could get. So that's kind of like common to regular people and how people think. So in his case, whatever his confirmation bias was, he simply was unable to discover that he had the second account that was lost. So it wasn't the system that thought for him. It was literally an accident. It was a lucky accident, because I'm sure he would have sold as soon as his 5,000 became 50,000, or maybe even 25. Yeah. So I think the same pressure to sell and to realize gains and profits exists everywhere in every asset.
There's a famous quote that Abraham Lincoln may have said, that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And I think in HEX has a mechanism that is built in to allow people to pay their future selves to time lock in a way where even if you get all those other things right with other cryptos, like the government and whether other people are going to be interested in buying them, and if the price goes up, you still have that counterparty risk with your future self that you're going to sell those gains too early. And we know that a little bit of delayed gratification in crypto it produces outsized returns. And we also know that when people can take gains earlier and get less gains, that dumps the price. And so when people are time locking and hoping that the price will go up, they're helping the price to go up by making the asset more scarce in the here and now. HEX is the only asset that I know of that has a chart of future market supply. And it also has incentives built in that cause people to change how they approach their own finances. Hexicans who rebuy their TShares because they don't want to get diluted, because they want to keep earning HEX every day, they're having to pay a higher and higher price in HEX terms every day that passes in order to buy a TShare, or they're having to stake longer, or both. And I think what we've started to see and what we're going to see is that that people are going to continue to compete to play this game where they're trying to maintain their position in the system, and that gives them something. This criticism that Richard has partially addressed and partially not addressed from the public is, well, HEX, maybe it's a scam, not only because of his appearance and his marketing, outrage marketing, but they think HEX is a scam because people say it needs new buyers in order to go on, and people equate that with a Ponzi. In reality, everything needs new buyers.
Exactly right. Everything absolutely needs new buyers.
But HEX is different than everything else because some of the people who are supposed to be cashing out are rebuying their TShares, and so the chart of future market supply tells you like the maximum amount that could come on the market, but all along the way, people could become wealthy from other airdrops. People could, have their life circumstances change, and they could get to a point like Jack got to, where he didn't have to sell Bitcoin when it mooned because he was doing well otherwise financially. And so I think that's kind of interesting that HEX has some of these properties, and I think I may be the first one who kind of started tracking. Well, I don't know if I'm the first, but I started tracking this this chart of how long are people holding in HEX. And Richard had outdated numbers. I mean, that's how fast the average stake length has been increasing. That he was off by like over half a year, and the average today is right around 6.5 years. And that means people have staked for a really long time, lots of 15-year stakes in order to get the average up from all the people who are staking a day or a year or whatever. But that number increasing, and the fact that since day 100, it's increased faster than time has passed. I'd love to get your guys' take on that, because that's something I just realized in the past week when I was making the chart for the conference, which I'm trying to find right now.
Yeah, that was a nice chart, because I can only talk about myself personally. Like my HEX stake length average is like 11.2 years. So, and I have a 15-year ladder. I've got HEX stakes that come out every year. Because I don't know, Jack, if you've heard this, but my favorite analogy to describe the HEX TShares, it's kind of like a virtual mining rig, like an ASIC miner for Bitcoin. They had the black box like you had back in the day. Well, TShares for HEX, that's like a virtual there's no hardware, just a virtualized version of that. And all you do is you lock your HEX up, and then it gives you in exchange this virtual ASIC miner. And for however many days you set it to stake, that's how many days you get the inflation that it mines. So that's really the two benefits. It saves you from yourself from selling too early, like everybody usually does, that when the gains go up too high, you're going to sell before the real peak years later. And in
Yeah.
HEX, while you wait, you're gaining inflation.
Yes, and let's not forget that it's not just inflation, right? It's also yield multiplier or API multiplier. So the longer you stake, the more reward you get. So essentially, the curve is not linear. The other thing that matters, obviously, is how many people are staking after you. So technically, if HEX is still early in terms of its adoption curve, the amount of inflation that you're getting is not just 3.69%, but you're actually competing among all the players or all the stakers. So technically, the earlier you start, the more your TShares are more valuable, while the system is not loaded with the new users. So or the new stakers, so to speak. So it totally makes sense to do it way early before anybody's out there, so that you can have the biggest share of the time value that passes with the least amount of people. So that's very interesting in itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one way to think about it is that, yes, new stakers will diminish your ability to generate yield. However, the positive of having new people staking actually means that they had to buy HEX somehow. And the network effect of people coming in aboard to become HEX investors actually ends up pushing the price forward. So yes, you will make a little bit less just because you're now competing and sharing the yield among everyone else. But yet the total dollar amount per HEX is actually increasing. So
The
there is a benefit.
And it's also interesting that those of us who started in the very beginning created these staking ladders. If we staked 2.5 years in the beginning, and that was the average in the beginning, let's say, and then now 2.5 years in, the average is 6.5 years, you got diluted. You didn't, relative to the people who are still staked, you were suffering some kind of dilution, because the only way in HEX terms that you can maintain your share of the future compound interest is by staking for the average length or longer. And so that's kind of a dynamic aspect of it as well. It'll be interesting to see people who start their stakes now, who stake for 6.5 years, whether that will hold, or whether 6.5 years from now, the average length, what if it's 8.5 years? And so
I would expect it to increase over time. Yeah. People are probably going to stake for longer and longer, because that's the only way that they can maintain more yield. Yeah.
Yeah, but ultimately, I mean, if HEX becomes $100 coin, right? So you could have the downward pressure on the total time staked, because people can say, hey, in the total dollar terms, I'm totally fine just taking for a year.
That would be a good problem to have as well. That is true.
Yeah, I mean, but everybody benefits anyway. So my point is that if the price remains static, then perhaps you need to compete against the time value period that people are taking on average. But if the price is increasing rapidly, then perhaps you would not feel so compelled to stake for that much longer.
Or a split and do some shorter stakes and some longer stakes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's how the bond market works. So a lot of the bond funds, they do exactly that. They do bond ladders. So you buy some 1-year treasuries, and then you buy 2-year treasuries, then you buy some 20-year treasuries that are expiring in 5 years. There's many ways to do it. So it's a common practice in the economic world to do ladders.
The other thing that is so shocking for anybody paying attention to, economics versus the new innovations that are happening in HEX is this is this is a chart that somebody gave me kind of last minute before the Pulse conference, and this is created by a guy who has done a full audit of HEX using his chain analysis methods that he had previously made public and then made private later on. But his name went from Gunther the accountant to now he goes by Wolverine. But he was kind enough to share these numbers that were fresh as of this past week. And one of the things that Gunther did was he established his own criteria to try to estimate like which coins were controlled by the origin address versus the ones that were user controlled. And part of how he did that was by looking at the behavior surrounding the big payday. And I guess I should just throw out there, like, you know, this audience, like the people who watch this show are very familiar with all this information, but maybe didn't realize that the amount of staked HEX that is user controlled is estimated to be 75.24%. And that is a very, very, very different picture of how things are going in HEX compared to the number that most people advertise, which is like 10%, which includes the origin address coins, the majority of which are not staked. And people can argue, and you know, maybe that's a good thing if they're getting an education out of it, as to whether the origin address should hold so many coins or not. I don't see it as a problem, but I'm typically updating my worldview, and I don't think that having a higher market cap is like necessarily the best way to play the game if everybody's keeping us off of the coin ranking sites because they've identified that you know, the Richard was trying to game the market cap system. I mean, I really don't think that's a good reason today to like have those coins. But I think in general, for the origin address to be able to defend against forks, like malicious forks, vampire attacks, stuff like that, I think it's super valuable to have that those coins there. We saw that the origin address acted in the best interest of the stakers by protecting the system from traders coming in and getting more than a 30% bonus by staking for just 2 days during the big payday that happened a year into HEX's existence. And by the origin address staking, 19 and the rest of the users all staking 99% of the coins, but traders not getting as high of a bonus that day because the origin address did stake for just that time period, I think was an interesting bit of history that proves part of the use case for having a billionaire or somebody who's suspected to have hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of Bitcoin and Ethereum and hundreds of millions of stable coins. To me, it really takes away the argument that he's going to dump HEX, even if he has 95% of the supply. It just totally, and I guess you could say, well, what if Richard changed his mind or like had a mental breakdown or something? But like, what we've seen so far is that the origin address has worked in the best interest of the stakers, even to the point where, Richard doesn't brag about how much HEX he owns because he doesn't want HEX to be considered a security, because he doesn't want people to expect profit from the work of others, putting money into a pool, all that kind of stuff that the Howey test defines. So I think that uncovering this true amount of user-controlled staked HEX that exists is somewhat relevant to our understanding of what the price might do, but also what the other emergent properties and the other forms of psychology that we can observe around the HEX ecosystem, I think, is really indicative of this number. what comments do you guys have, I guess, about this discovery?
Yeah, so one comment that I had is about the game theory specifically. How do you guys feel about the game theory implementation in HEX? What do you think about it?
I think that, I think, first of all, we changed the name of the show. We did like over a year of being Quant Gang on Tuesday nights. And we changed when David and I started working together. I guess now it was 19 weeks ago, because he and I share so many of the similar values and are both trusted by the community. We changed the name to Game Theory Gang because we recognize the importance of game theory in defining how valuable crypto is and how humans interact with the technology of programmable money. I think that the coolest game theory has to do with kind of this analogy that I would make for how HEX could be good for people's mental health. When we look at like part of what makes a plant healthy is the soil that it's growing in, its environment. And I think part of what makes humans healthy, mentally healthy, physically healthy, is the monetary environment that they're living in, among other environmental factors. And so when you knowingly or unknowingly, like accidentally time lock something that becomes super valuable, like many of us early hexicans did, I think that it changes our kind of like incentives and our psychology in terms of if people have something really valuable to look forward to in the future, even if it kind of fluctuates a lot in price, it causes, I think, some people to be more invested in the future and want to like make the world a better place so that they can live with their mad gains in a better world.
Well, one of the ways to think about the game theory is that there is such concept called Nash Equilibrium. So Nash was the professor that actually came up with the game theory. So Nash Equilibrium basically is a value, and this value is can be expressed in user behavior, where among all the players that are playing the game, whatever the game might be, which may be buying cryptocurrency and holding it for shorter or longer period of time, selling it, or buying more, the Nash equilibrium is basically the value that speaks for the way that should there be a single winner or any winners within the game, it should not affect the rest of the game adversely. So in other words, the behavior that stimulates proper action and positive action towards the ecosystem. So that is not just how the users are behaving, whether they're staking HEX or not. Like what you guys are doing, you're propagating the message out there, what blockchain really is and how self-custody is important and how HEX is counterparty resistant because it's mostly trading on Uniswap. So that in itself improves the Nash's equilibrium towards people actually retaining the value of their crypto holdings. In this particular case, specifically, it's HEX, but it could be anything. So that I think is very interesting, and I would say that you cannot say that only HEX has the game theory. Everything has the game theory. Some of the game theory features are better implemented than the others. Like for example, let's say a country like United States comes up with an ETF that is pegged to Bitcoin spot price. Is it better for everybody that hold Bitcoin? From very cursory look, it feels like it is better because it will pump. However, it actually takes the value control away from the people that hold Bitcoin towards the institutions that can leverage it and manipulate the price however they like. And from being a store of value, which how it was designed to be originally, it becomes a speculative instrument by moving the Nash Equilibrium away from the majority of people that held Bitcoin towards institutions that have the most economic power, especially if they have the rights to print the dollars. So think about it. The government prints the dollars, the fiat is debased, Bitcoin gets pumped, and then gets dumped. Now, whoever wins are not the common people. It's the actually people who are charging fees for transactions, charging for investment fees, whatnot, gamification of the whole process. Ultimately, it wouldn't be the regular people; it would be people who are participating in this sort of major financial kung fu. Like, for example, in the last 20 years, we had thousands of IPOs. People that make the most money on IPOs are companies like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, and pretty much all the so like Citigroup, all the top bankers out there. They just take their 20% of whatever that they do, right? And they have their own investors, right? But that sort of windfall of money is not available to people who are just regular investors who want to buy on the open market, right? So many times, what I have seen is that the IPO actually gets pumped, and then on the open market, the banks themselves, they dump it, right? So I guess my point is that it is not clear that creating an ETF for Bitcoin is a good idea for the Bitcoin value, or pretty much you could replace Bitcoin with any cryptocurrency. So where we are with HEX today is that we're somewhat below the radar, and we're resistant to the manipulation of the centralized exchanges that actually have the economic power to pump and dump, and essentially mostly make fees themselves at the expense of everybody else that they onboard. So that's what the way that I would judge the game theory implementation being better in HEX.
And I think that to add to that, when people are deciding whether to provide liquidity, like having low liquidity is a blessing and a curse. But one thing it does is it stops, huge players from entering, and then not pushing the price against themselves. It causes bigger players to like go in slowly, or
that isn't exactly accurate, because you can have very, very high liquidity and still be decentralized. It is just we're looking at the effect, and we're saying the effect is due to the cause of centralized exchanges having the most money. Now imagine the world without centralized exchanges.
Well, I'm thinking of DEXs in particular.
Yeah, I mean, specifically on DEX, if you look at the price transparency on Nomics for Ethereum, for example, so it has like the thickest order book, right? But its transparency is like 50% or something like that. So my point is that it is unlikely to be manipulated by DEXs, and it's mostly manipulated by higher end leverage in places like FTX and Binance. So that's where the price manipulation really happens. And of course, I mean, if we talk about other instruments, like they have a grayscale product that you can literally buy yourself ETHE shares of a trust that actually buys Ethereum. So you're not holding any Ethereum, but yet you can manipulate the price because you're giving more economic power to Grayscale to move the price of Ethereum. It has nothing to do with the DEX, right? So what I'm saying, I guess, is that the difference between having a thin order book and a thick order book does not really necessarily should make that much of a difference. The only thing that matters is that the price ends up being more stable because there's more sellers and there's more buyers. But it doesn't necessarily means it's more volatile. It actually would be more volatile if the order book is really, really thin, but people may realize that it's thin and they don't want to push the price down because it's decentralized, and it's quite obvious that if you sell 10 million HEX, then the price is just going to plummet, right? So people who are aware generally would not do that because the DEX will actually stop them from executing.
Because it'll give them a worse price because they're pushing the price against themselves with the automated market maker.
Exactly. So they would know that. But the thing is that if they were to do it on the centralized exchange, nothing like that would happen. They would not actually see it. So they will not get any warning whatsoever. And that's where the price instability can actually occur. But on a DEX, at least you are smart enough to run your own MetaMask or whatever the wallet of your choice and interact with a decentralized exchange. So you know what exactly that you're doing and you know what you're getting into. So you will not necessarily execute a trade that you know will push the price down for yourself specifically, first and foremost.
Yeah,
But the centralized exchange will not stop you.
Yeah, because the DEX it should show you it'll give you like a quote for your order first, and it shows you the percentage of price slippage.
Yeah. I mean, it will not necessarily give you a percentage of the price slippage, but there is a setting.
It literally does. It's on the screen.
1 inch does it, or Uniswap too?
I think both. And I use matcha.xyz, and they show percentage of how much slippage to expect.
Yeah. What I have seen is that when I play with the liquidity pools, it told me that I need to adjust my slippage percentage and to allow for the slippage to be high enough so that my pool can actually be engaged. So, but it is advanced stuff. Like some people do not even know what does it mean? Why is their pool not engaging, right? So, what is the deal? So, I guess my point is that people who are trading on DEXs, they're smarter than the average, pump and dump people who are there just to make a quick buck and get immediate gratification.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So, Jack, do you think that HEX will be able to reach like a tipping point with onboarding if we don't have the same, let's say, marketing budget as other things that come along, other coins that come along? They can invest all of the money that they're pretending like, that they're actually bringing in. They can reinvest high portions of it into pumping and marketing and paying influencers and a lot of the things that people in HEX are somewhat unwilling in the past to do. What's your take?
I think as soon as Richard blows his Lambo up, it's gonna skyrocket. That's all he has to do. Or a big statue that he's building.
Well, in order for HEX to not be a security, we like to think that it's those of us who are here kind of doing more organic things other than just the founder who might be able to bring adoption. But I really wanted to bring this question to you.
That's a good point.
I really wanted to bring this question to you because it's some really interesting game theory, I think. As somebody in the HEX ecosystem, of course, I'm trying to do what's best for myself and others and thinking deeply about those kinds of things. One of the things that I've noticed is that, like, if HEX were to get more adoption, that the most valuable audience for me to be speaking to would be the people who are already in HEX. And so I think that there's kind of like a not super ideal situation currently where lots of HEX people are devoting their efforts to like providing information to people who are already in HEX, because that's going to be the most valuable audience in the future. For example, this show is probably the longest running regular weekly show that has maintained the attention of the OGs in the space. And I know that there are lots of whales and maybe one Poseidon and sharks and dolphins. I mean, there's like, out of the 4,000 regular views that we get each week on this show, sometimes it's more, but like 2,000 of those people are HEX dolphins and above. So they've been millionaires, recently until maybe they drop, and now some are millionaires, some aren't. But like that's a lot of concentrated wealth for one audience. And it's curious to me, like, personally, I want to do more things to reach out to people who are not already in HEX, but it's interesting to me that is not going to be the most valuable audience. If somebody else does it, then it's kind of like shifting the burden onto others.
So I actually thought about this question, and it's a very interesting question. And one of the ways that the community can onboard more people is through education. So specifically, the message could be not necessarily, hey, HEX is meant to appreciate its price because it has all of the game mechanics and economic model that is the best for the blockchain, right? We can say that, but that works really well for people that understand what the blockchain is all about. Right now, people that understand blockchain, I would say roughly less than 1% of the human population. So that is the integral part of the adoption. So if that 1% moves up to 5, then you can actually have a network multiplier effect. So one of the ways that I could envision is a workshop that educates people what blockchain really is, why there's value in blockchain, what is self-custody, and what problems are we solving. And then use HEX as an example, as an element that has most native features of the blockchain. So if that was the approach, then you could actually speak to people that will end up understanding what blockchain is all about and what self-custody is. And then they would naturally be asking a question, okay, is it Bitcoin that I should be buying, or is it something else? Is it Ethereum, or is it shitcoin shitcoin du jour, right? So the answer might be is that, okay, here are the examples, and here are how they're different. Bitcoin does this, Ethereum does that, Litecoin, that's how it came about. That's what's driving its value. This is Dogecoin. It's being shilled by Elon Musk because he has friends who have Dogecoin, and now it's accepted by EMC and Chipotle, and maybe others soon, right? But the point is that none of those are, well, say for Ethereum, actually utilize the blockchain to a point where it's actually programmable money. So HEX itself has the elements of being programmable in the sense where it actually has the economics built in right in the token itself that matches blockchain's ethos. So, but for people to really get it and really to be adapters of HEX, they need to understand what the blockchain ethos to begin with. So I think if there is a workshop, like for example in Las Vegas, where people buy tickets, they're serious entrepreneurs, they want to understand more about blockchain technology, where the value is coming from, where the scams, then that could be a workshop that could introduce those concepts and ultimately give people understanding that HEX is open source project. Well, by open source, I mean anybody can read the source on Ethereum. It's locked and immutable, and there's very little manipulation by the centralized exchanges that are really on-ramps for people's fiat, or just or people like Celsius, companies like Celsius, where I think I mentioned this to Corey, is that Celsius is not really a blockchain technology company. What they are is they're trying to tell people, hey, we're going to pay you if you give us your money, and then you're also giving up all the rights to your money because we can go bankrupt and take your money with us. So a lot of people do not understand the difference between Celsius and regular brokerage, right? It's just not on the agenda. So if the message is to educate as many people as possible about what are the elements, what is the blockchain's prime directive or its first principles, which I think I tweeted about it. So I would say the first principles are self-custody, censorship resistance, and transparency as a feature or a service, right? Where everybody can validate everybody and the blockchain speaks the truth. Where if it doesn't match any of the three, then it's really not part of blockchain. It's part of something else that tells you that it's working with the blockchain, but it's just a proxy. And so if that message were to be delivered to the masses, then it would be obvious that HEX is pretty much the closest representation of the blockchain's first principles.
Like, I guess I won't go into too many specifics, but I'll try to be like very frank with you. What I've found with working with others in the HEX space is that there are the OGs who like are happy to be retiring and getting paid lots of HEX every day from their TShares, even if they're just accruing it and getting paid out over time. But there are, let's say, like new people who are incentivized to come into the ecosystem and to like basically they figure out fairly quickly that the OGs are the valuable targets that they can market to. They can create, all of a sudden you've got people creating new coins and marketing things that are not part of the HEX ecosystem because they're trying to catch up to the OGs. There's like a difference between people who are OGs and already made it, and then the new people who are coming in. They aren't really trying to build awareness, even if they say they are. They're not trying to build awareness to the outside audience, outside of HEX, because they realize that they can just, they can just try to catch up to the OG's wealth by, let's say running an in-person conference that, has already done some bad things. But then for those of us who are trying to keep the community together, we're not sure like whether we should really call out other people because they already have supporters, and we don't want, like there's too much infighting, but there's also too much like internal marketing versus what are the incentives that are going to get people to like spread the word more is kind of what I'm wondering.
What are the incentives for the people to get the word out more? Well, I think if all of us are invested in HEX, and we also believe HEX to be the true representation of what blockchain value is for the world, then it is our, I would say, responsibility to not only to talk about that, hey, you buy this, you're gonna get rich, right? Everybody thinks that, everybody wants that, but ultimately, you may be rich one day and poor the other day as soon as you make a mistake once you make a ton of money. So the more value in the community is to bring people in to understand what are the features of the blockchain that can help the world and help themselves so that they can make their own mental leap into HEX or in projects like HEX, because I'm sure there are other interesting projects. So I heard that Ergo was one of the projects that did a fair launch. So in other words, they did no pre-mine and no minting of any kind, and they are very transparent about what they're doing. They're not very popular because a lot of stuff they're doing is, as you would say, Maddie, for OGs and for people who are like really deep into math of things, and they call it ergonomic token or something like that. That's why they call it Ergo. So, but they have some interesting concepts. So my point is that there's clear and blatant scams happening, and unfortunately, there's more of it, and they have bigger marketing dollars. And so they're trying to confuse people into giving their earned money converted to stable coin and just pass it to them so that they can make money with yield by leveraging it and reinvesting it. So we have seen all of it before in the early, I guess, 20th century when the markets started to come up with products that took people's money and leveraged it up. It was everywhere. So 2008, subprime mortgage loans seemed like a good idea at the time when things were going up, but then when things collapsed, everybody lost everything. So I think the incentive is that, as I mentioned before, I believe that there may be less than 1% of the world's population that really understand the concepts of blockchain, and we could move that number higher, and we all benefit. First of all, we are the shareholders of HEX because we hold it. Some of us, more than others or whatnot, whatever, right? The point is that we are invested in the truth and the first principles of blockchain. So, and we should bring people aboard not only to save them from themselves, but also give them the tools to make the right decisions. And that's what will drive the value ultimately for everybody.
I think so too. Yeah, I think I've even come to my own realization recently, maybe right before I became aware of your streams that you've been doing in the HEX community about education. And it was like, 3 weeks ago now that I decided to launch my first quote unquote paid course because I saw that people had watched 360,000 hours of my HEX videos on YouTube. And, I was aware that Richard and other people have said that when you charge for something, you attract a different audience of people who might be willing to work harder to learn something. And I wanted to start playing with the, different formats of education. And,
yeah, well, it's totally true. I mean, when you charge people, they end up being invested in paying attention because they have spent their economic energy and they bought something. I remember when I was in the university, I really didn't like the class that it was an assembly language on early CMS systems. I just hated it. It was all just really, really boring, and I couldn't make myself to show up. But what made me show up in the class is that knowing that I already paid for it, so I may as well just do a good job there. So of course,
$150 a credit, right?
yeah. And then the thing is, it's going to be money wasted, and if I fail it, then I'm going to have to take something else again. So I'm wasting my money and my time. So yeah.
So I'm currently in the middle of doing this experiment where I launched a paid course, and then I couldn't force myself to keep to charge for it really. And so I am giving away for free for a limited time, and maybe in the future I'll be able to bring myself to charge people. But for me, it's I got all this information for free from others. I want to pay it forward. And so maybe I'll learn along the way how to not feel bad about charging people and all that. But currently I've been super surprised by the response. I think I checked earlier today, over 420 people signed up, and I'm doing a chain analysis 101 course, and we're showing people. I mean, there are people who are rich, people who are brilliant, who really just don't even know some of the basics of how to look on Etherscan and BSC scan and to see what is the origin address doing, what are the sacrifice addresses doing for PulseChain, what do we know and what do we don't know, how do we interpret these things. And there are some interesting stories that can be told from chain analysis. I was surprised to learn that I think the 3 of the top 10 podcasts in the world currently are true crime podcasts. And there's so I think the third course I'm going to do tomorrow night, we're going to look into the biggest hack in HEX history, where somebody who actually came on the show and had been a long time known whale in HEX, it goes by the name HEX 19, had gotten hacked for $80 million worth of HEX. And so we did a special episode about that maybe 6 or 9 months ago. And the coolest thing about the outcome of that tragedy was his resilience and attitude towards it, that he said, if other people can learn from this, he's going to be okay because he still has other investments that weren't affected. But the HEX 19 has continued to be a kind of a shining light in the HEX space. And maybe David, you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, and HEX 19's daughter is also a Hexican now, doing streams. And I mean, even after, because I remember that night, right? We were in Albany at the Albany tour,
yes,
with KSB.TV, And then you went to go do the show with HEX 19. I remember watching that story like live, basically, and it was heartbreaking to see him get hacked for that much. But what I think our community learned as a result of that right after is the importance of hardware wallets and protecting your seed phrases and the true definition of like the sovereignty of your keys, right? If you don't have good security and you don't have your keys, you don't have anything. So I think everybody got a big wake-up call and a big reminder about how that works.
So what exactly happened? Did somebody break into his wallet and that's how they stole it, or? Yeah.
Like one way to put it is that he had all of his seed words on, let's say, like a notepad file that was in the cloud, and one way or another somebody gained access to that. And
it was a SIM swap, wasn't it? They SIM swapped his cell phone and then they gained access to his iCloud, and then they had a text file.
Yeah. So one of the ways to, I think, at least what I learned over the years, is that you can have your 24-word seed phrase, but have yet another password to unlock the transactions. Like they call it passphrase or security phrase, I think, on Ledger, and there are others that call it differently. Like maybe they call it a PIN or something like that. So in other words, even if you restore your wallet with the stolen, or somebody restores the wallet with the stolen passphrase, 24 words, then they still will not be able to transact or even gain access to the accounts, because there's 25th word that is required to unlock it. Then it could be any length.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's what everybody should be using, really, because I mean, so anyone can misplace a piece of paper with those 24 words, right?
Yes.
So it's very important to secure that with the 25th word. That's in your head.
And yeah, totally. And this this particular HEX user was he knew a lot about security. He had a computer science background, but he had just kind of been using shortcuts and stuff, even though he knew better. And that's how he described how it had happened. And so I think that single event, when we ran a survey later, caused like hundreds of people in HEX to increase their security. And so that's a cool example of how education in this community is something that we try to make sure that everybody can get, and try to make it accessible. And I just think it's amazing that a community member would be willing to come on a show and talk about something so negative for them. And I thought it was cool how he has shown his resilience and really been kind of like a guiding light for our community. Came to the in-person HEX conference that I hosted in Las Vegas in March. And
yeah, he was on stage with us for an hour talking about the whole incident and security. And live in front of 100 people.
That's very important. I think there could be workshops just to talk about those things. And Matty, I'm glad that you're doing those classes. I think it's amazing. I think if Richard ever blows up his Lambo, he should do a masterclass. Blockchain masterclass. Just like it doesn't need to be HEX masterclass. It could be his understanding that he learned over the years on masterclass.com. So that can command amazing audience and give exposure to him as a knowledgeable persona of blockchain and the value on the blockchain, because he spends all those hours talking to YouTube, right? And all of information is out there. But if he gets into a channel that the masterclass has, or other channels like that, I think he can actually better the world, and by de facto attract the audience to the projects that he's involved with, because obviously they're gonna link in his bio what he was up to. So building PulseChain and inventor of HEX. So why not?
That's an interesting idea. I wonder if Richard, just the fact that Richard did put out some form of premium content, if it would be as popular as his YouTube videos, or maybe even more popular?
I think it would be more popular because it's, on YouTube, you get pretty much kind of unfiltered access. So you get a lot of good stuff and a lot of bad stuff. But if he pursues what I would call curated channels, I would see humanity benefiting from his knowledge and the time that he spent, buying Bitcoin at $3 and selling it at 30. I mean, that in itself is silly, but it has great implications, right? For pretty much everyone, because everyone has done something like that.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's the benefit of all of us kind of brainstorming and trying stuff out, and working together as a community. The HEX community has so many examples of the people who are contributing. That normally you would expect probably more of a tragedy of the commons situation. I think people being staked has an impact on them to kind of stick around longer and to contribute more, which is another kind of emergent property of something where you can't just like unstake it all of a sudden.
Right. Yeah. I think education is a huge role, and that's ultimately what attracted me to begin with, because I came back to Twitter after 7 years not being on Twitter, and I saw that I had all those followers, and I just kept browsing through, crypto communities. Eventually, I stumbled on Pulse, and Pulse linked me to HEX, and HEX linked me to Richard, and Richard looked like a scammer, which I figured, okay, might be a scammer, but then why would a scammer look like a scammer? He should look like Mashinsky, right? Mashinsky doesn't look like a scammer, right? But the end result is the scam. So I figured that Richard is acting out, being a scammer, so that he can annoy the rest of the blockchain community to attack him, so that he can destroy them, and and at the same time, that becomes a very effective message. So I have spent hours entertaining myself watching him dating other people who try to come up with ways to tell him that what he's doing is a Ponzi scheme, and they just don't even know what the definition of the Ponzi scheme really is. But ultimately, again, coming back to what attracted me is that he would talk to people who would not even understand what he was saying, but he was saying the truth because I understood him, right? I knew what he was saying resonating with me, and whoever was his counterparty or opponent at the time, they were just foaming at the mouth, just yelling scam, right? And coming up with all kinds of what does he say? Imaginary horribles, parade of
imaginary horribles. Yep,
that's the one. Yeah. I think it's part of the human gestalt. Like, people don't even realize it. Their mind just conjures up the parade of imaginary horribles. They don't even know that they're doing it. It's just part of the protection mechanism, because for some reason they are feeling threatened, perhaps that their project or whatever that they're involved in may be a scam, and they're just lashing out.
There's a relatively new tool that we have in the HEX community.
I've seen that. It looks really cool. Yeah, I think he tweeted about it. I actually played with it. It's pretty great. So that could be part of education. Like, use this tool to come up, or what I would love for this to have is common search phrases that actually lead to interesting information. So we know that the word parade actually brings up parade of imaginary horribles. Oh yeah, there we go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So there should be a cloud of them, and they all should be different sizes based on popularity of search. What I don't see is scam. Where's scam here? There should be scam.
I think this tool is so new that it hasn't had enough data to not enough users have run searches to make frequently asked questions yet.
Yeah. No, it's I think this tool is great. Yeah.
So yeah, when it comes to Richard's outrage marketing, I guess for me, it's created a dilemma recently, and that's still something that I kind of need to work through and deal with partially offline. But I guess any guidance would be helpful. For me, I had, let's just say I had tried to line up some guests for the Pulse conference that have their reputations to worry about, who are from academia, who are from, NIH and different prestigious places. And they weren't allowed to participate or didn't want to participate for one reason or another because of Richard's outrage marketing. And so I've kind of gone back and forth on my own kind of like the value, because like at first I was like, oh, that's horrible that he's always talking about his PP, and then I was like, oh, it's fine, and then I was like, wait a second, no, that's interfering with like kind of the message of mental health and some of the things that Richard himself stands for. And I'm just curious what your guys' takes are on that method of getting, overcoming the gatekeeping, that method of being trying to increase your popularity through populist tactics.
Yeah, I mean, I personally haven't found that marketing very effective. And he's been doing it for a couple months, and it hasn't made any noticeable difference that I can see. And yeah, I thought the other night during the conference, it was like, that was really bad timing. Like that was, yeah, I didn't enjoy it personally. Even I face palmed, right? I'm sitting there watching, just being like, God damn, bro. Like with this fucking tape measure, are you serious? Like why? Like that was cringe as fuck. So I hope he changes course, but I don't know. We'll see. Probably won't.
So my 2 cents on this is this. I would use Elon Musk test. So Elon Musk is the richest dude on the planet, or at least he was. Sometimes he is, sometimes he's not. I don't know. Depends on the Tesla price. But the thing is, what we cannot take from him is that he changed the cars the way we know of them, and he changed the course of the manufacturing. So like right now, Volkswagen is trying to actually beat Tesla, and it's great for the planet. The same thing with taking on NASA and having rockets that self-land and basically reclaiming them and refueling them and flying again in space is just amazing for space travel. So definitely, hugely respectable dude. Now, the way that we can use him as a test is this. What if he liked HEX and not Doge? Right? I mean, so Doge doesn't do anything. It just has a community. It doesn't do anything. So if we were to imagine a parallel universe where Elon Musk basically just said what he said about Doge, where he would say, I would always support HEX because it follows the primary directive of blockchain, first principles, the way that he understands how to build technology, in the same way that he would understand what the blockchain is all about. Now, that would immediately create huge worldwide adoption. So the problem is that I would say his lawyers would not let him do that because of above mentioned outrageous tactics, right? So unfortunately, we fail that test, right? Simply because there are certain elements in the world that are incompatible in, or at least in their vision of standing next to a community that is involved with somebody who is so outrageously flamboyant and shameless. Now, I think it's hilarious. I mean, for me, it's no big deal. The more, the better, right? But I realize that for Elon Musk, it would not be the same. So we need to think outside of the box, and we need to, pass the message that should we want worldwide adoption, then we need to basically expand the game theory field across all participants, not only the people who get outraged by the message. Like, for example, Saudis. Now, they can't even tolerate swearing.
Mm.
And yet, they have a ton of petrodollars. And they happen to be converting their petrodollars to blockchain technologies like metaverse. And they're basically know that inflation is eroding their wealth, and they absolutely need to participate in something that's out there that can maintain their status in the world. And so, but I don't think they will ever align with somebody who even swears online or known for swearing. So that's somewhat of an issue, right? I mean, I don't know about China, but like when I was at Google, Google had to create a proper Chinese office with the proper Chinese etiquette and just to be compatible. And Google realized that Chinese market is extremely important. I mean, ultimately, we had to exit that market for some issues, whatever they were. But at the time, it was the market worth pursuing. So Google actually molded themselves into becoming more Chinese-like, so that at least we could get into that market. Now, whether there was the right thing or the wrong thing, I think if a million Chinese people were able to search using Google, now that's great for them because they would get access to information. I mean, I think there was an issue with the Great Firewall of China where they wouldn't let them search certain things that was not in line with their political party. But my point is that Google being Google, they still wanted to spread the technology to the people out there. So, but ultimately, I think the leaders of hexagon community should think globally and understand that there are people out there who will never be compatible. And this sort of saying, what does he say? Or somebody says, adapt with the world or be left behind, something like that. I forget. So adjust your worldview or be left behind, right? And the worldview changes all the time, right? So if this is the message that the community is propagating, and it's about learning new things, it's about adapting things that are out there, generating value, then we absolutely need to adapt to the worldwide communities that may or may not be compatible with the message today. So that's what I think.
Well, I appreciate your input on that because it is something that I think our community is still trying to understand how we can, be supportive even with the outrage marketing. And I kind of see Richard's points in terms of, he's not doing what he's doing for the internal community. He's trying to reach outwards. He sees gatekeeping as a serious problem. I think that maybe with the right people working on marketing, I think that he would not be stopped from advertising himself. He would not be stopped from advertising maybe HEX, but definitely his experience that he got stopped from creating a billboard about himself. Even I think that shaped part of his outrage marketing. His willingness to do outrage marketing. So it's kind of, it's just interesting how we've seen him evolve, from Sci-Vive to outrage marketing, and then where will things go in the future. Personally, I think if he created his own reality TV show where he was choosing the next dog that he would adopt, that he could name it, Richard's Next Top Doge, and he could, get the same kind of like shock value, silliness, like, he could, but the difference is that lots of, dogs are like the most popular pet in the world. And there is something that Dogecoin is doing that is useful, is it's onboarding people because they're not taking it too seriously, or they're seeing it as like part of the Occupy Wall Street movement of like, being irreverent to money and being silly about it, treating it as a meme, as kind of a response to feeling like the markets are rigged. And yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you can go Joe Rogan style. You can be a comedian by day, MMA fighter by evening, and a podcaster by night. I mean, so you can run those to 2 or 3 different personas. And one of the ways for Richard to be better in reaching the world is specifically, I think, if he gets into the education space and actually be treated as an entity that helps people. Regardless of the marketing of the crypto, then that could actually shift the balance, right? And then people would say, okay, well, this is what he does, so that's why he does it. But yet, he is this very knowledgeable, deep thinking person that actually helping, people out there for, maybe there would be some cost, but ultimately, you cannot put the price on somebody's life-changing knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, because that's what Richard's YouTube channel has been for me for the past 4 to 5 years. Is he's given away all this information. I remember when he was interviewing Roger Ver back with the Bitcoin Cash fork happened, and he was interviewing Max Kaiser. So yeah, you're right. I mean, Richard's been with us in the crypto space for since 2017. Since before that, the big bull, last bull run. So for me, it's like he already is like the ultimate teacher. I've learned more from him about markets. I mean, he invented Hart's Law, which describes how a trading pair of 2 coins kind of makes their price move in unison because they're interchangeable. I think that's a great point. I think it would be great if Richard had some sort of academy or something like that. Like, yeah, that would be very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
Another point I heard recently, and I'm not sure if it was because I was listening to the hours of content Jack has produced recently, or if maybe I heard it from somebody else, but somebody was talking about how there's a difference between the crypto people who are like playing nicely with others, who are not kind of like gatekeeping innovation. And then there are the people who are more maximalist and they don't want things built on top of Bitcoin, et cetera. And since David, you mentioned Roger Ver, actually, I forgot to replay the 1-minute clip that we saw from I forgot to play it at the Pulse conference that he had done for the HEX conference. But if you guys don't mind, I'll go ahead and play this 1-minute clip from Roger Ver here real quick.
Oh yeah, you have it? Yeah, great.
Cool.
Hi everyone in the HEX community. My name is Roger Ver. I was the first investor in the cryptocurrency ecosystem and a long time other participant in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. Really did a good job of convincing me to make a video for all the HEX fans out there today, even though I'm trying to take a break from social media, everything. But just want to congratulate you guys on raising, I think I read $27 million for SENS. That's a really big deal and a really big amount of money. And so thank you and congratulations for that, since that's something I'm also interested in. Anyhow, I haven't had time to follow HEX real closely, but from what I can see, you guys are trying to build faster, better, cheaper, more reliable payments and a platform to do all of that than everything Ethereum could do and then some. So just want to congratulate and cheer you guys on when it comes to those goals that you have. And wish everybody the best of luck in the future, building a better world for all of us to live in. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great response from him.
Yeah, he's a good example of somebody who's like, I think, more committed to the first principles of blockchain than to the financial outcome of any certain coin.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Definitely.
Switching gear, like that's maybe a perfect transition. If Jack, you still have some time here, we go for hours and hours. Hopefully you still have some time you can stick around and we can talk about longevity. The HEX community raised $27.5 million for the SENS Foundation as one of the options of how people could sacrifice for PulseChain. And the specific rules stated that if you sacrificed to the Sens Foundation address, that you would get 75% of the sacrifice point credit that you would get from sacrificing to the address that we have no expectations from, that was the main place people were sending funds. And I know for me myself, I like a significant portion of the amount that I was doing, I sent to the Sens and took that 25% hit because I really care about the mission of longevity. And this was really the first time I had come across Aubrey de Grey, the Sens Foundation, and in any serious way, because I knew that Richard had donated his time previously to the cause. Kind of since the sacrifice period ended for PulseChain, probably like 11 months ago now, or something like that, 10 months ago, we've seen that this $27.5 million has created some controversy and problems within the Sens Foundation. And David and I have been kind of using our platforms, our streaming platforms and positions in the community to try to keep people updated on how those funds were being used or not used, and what kind of the scandals were going on with the Sens, because they had fired the person who we thought we were donating to, Aubrey de Grey, who founded the Sens Foundation. He also co-founded the Methuselah Foundation, which is Sens actually spun off of Methuselah as more of like the cellular laboratory that had the mission of working on long-term things that nobody else would want to work on because they wouldn't be profitable immediately. And so the goal of the Sens Foundation was to be more long-term thinking, which kind of aligns with the idea, the HEX ethos in a way. But the founder, Aubrey de Grey, I went down the rabbit hole and I did a deep dive into like the accusations against him, and found that they were, made out of thin air. That's what the investigation ended up proving to some extent. But anyway, so the current situation is that Aubrey, after he had been accused of a sex scandal that was bogus, then the board decided to then accuse him. Oh, well, if that wasn't true, then we're going to accuse you of having a drinking problem. And so Aubrey came to the HEX conference and updated all of us that, broke the news that he had been fired and that there were these untrue allegations. And since then, he has been sober. He quit drinking because not necessarily because he had a problem, but because he wanted everybody to know that he was willing to do whatever it takes to, achieve his, the goals of the donors, really. So Aubrey, participated in the online the PulseConference.online that we hosted this last weekend, and kind of gave us more of an update. The 27 million has not been used yet, because it's now tied up legally, and we can announce today on this show that the person who donated $10 million to that 27.5 million, once they saw what happened at the PulseConference.online, they donated just in the past week another $150,000 to the legal campaign to try to get that $27.5 million going again for that long-term research. And so that's a pretty incredible thing to announce. I think that's really cool that there was a whale out there watching this show, and heard from Greg, who was in the conference talking about the legal side of things. And so thank you to that person who donated to that cause. And I guess that kind of helps us transition to our longevity discussion, because I know that Jack has educated himself a lot on, some practical things that he does to achieve better health.
Yeah, longevity is a thing. I mean, a lot of people think that longevity actually means just living longer, but the concept in this subject is actually lifespan. It's not the lifespan, but health span. Is how many years you're healthy and able to achieve your goals, and then help your friends, help your family, help the world. So that's what really resonated with me from my early studies, and I think I really got into it about 10 years ago. I just wanted to improve my health, and it just, I got very, very interested in the science, and like specifically, I started with this thing called AMPK activator, and I think I talked with Richard about it, specifically about apple cider vinegar. I was showing him the little cup, just holding it in front of me, saying, "Hey, that's what I'm drinking right now." And so, what AMPK activator is basically an ancient gene pathway that rejuvenates the body and repairs the body when it senses adversity, and adversity is generally caloric restriction. Yeah, I tweeted that. So funny. So funny. You have no idea how many people DM me asking me like how to drink apple cider vinegar. And I think I mentioned to Richard that he should put some cayenne pepper into it as well, so that the body really freaks out and feels like it's about to die. So it will upregulate all of the recovery mechanisms and clear your mind and get you like more like running at the higher frequency in your own brain. And
what's the sorry to digress, but what's the exact recipe? Because I saw somebody in the comments before had posted if they do like half a cup full, then they're good, and if they do a whole one, then it like screws them up.
Well, you cannot do a cup full or even a half a cup. The right method is just either a teaspoon or a tablespoon in a full glass of water. So you have to dilute it so it's palatable and you do not burn your esophagus or anything like that, or your digestive system is not in distress. I mean, you just need a little bit of it, and you can put. So what I like to do is I like putting liquid stevia into it, so there's no sugar spike, and yet it's a little bit more palatable. I mean, though even without it, it tastes like just a little sour apple juice or something like that. I like adding cayenne pepper into it because it stimulates the body's mechanism to burn fat. And burning fat is just a very, very basic concept, but in reality, what happens is that your body actually starts cleaning out the cells that are in what they call a senescent state. Senescent state meaning they're not quite dead, they're not quite alive, and they're producing all kinds of hormones and secreting chemicals that are affecting other cells around them. So this is what we call the process of autophagy, or self-eating. So auto is self, and phagy is eating, I believe. And when the cells identify that your body doesn't have enough calories from food, the first cells to go are the cells that are basically need to be deleted and removed from your body by being broken into amino acids. And you're essentially rejuvenating everything, including your organs and including your brain too, because brain does get affected by issues of errors. Essentially, what aging is accumulation of errors on the DNA level through a process that's called methylation. There are methylation rings that get added into the DNA structures of the cells that make cells not function as they were designed to function. Like, for example, your liver cell may think it's a skin cell, or your brain cell may think it's a skin cell, and obviously will not work, right? And so autophagy is the mechanism to actually to get rid of them before they cause even more damage and create end-of-life diseases. So apple cider vinegar is one of those chemicals. So there's an acid in it, and I forget what it's called, but it stimulates the gene expression that stimulates and increases autophagy, and you go into the state what they call ketosis. So the diet obviously is a low carb diet, removes the freely available insulin in your body so that the cells can actually be able to be consumed by your own body, because when insulin is secreted, it opens up a path for the cells to receive nutrients but not expel them. So when you're on a keto diet, what happens is it's a very low sugar, it's a very low carb. Your body is actually just receiving amino acids from protein and fat, which does not spike your insulin. So most of your cells are open for recombination into better cells, essentially. So, and that's the process of autophagy. So there's a whole list of things that I tweeted just a couple of days ago that you can consider taking. So apple cider vinegar is one, cayenne pepper is the other. Caffeine, actually.
How much of the cayenne pepper do you put in?
Just enough to make it hot, however you like. I mean, obviously you don't want to kill yourself from being completely burned by it, but some people have different tolerance levels. So I would say just enough so that you can see the specks floating in it, and then drink it. Combine it with exercise, because exercise actually creates the calorie deficit as well, and it creates a hormonal response for the body, so that the process of autophagy is even stimulated even more. And then if you add fasting, 16-hour fasting on top of it, that's even better. So you'll have a multiplication effect for rejuvenation, essentially. So intermittent fasting, I'm a big fan of. I practice it pretty much every day. So today, I don't think I even had dinner yet, and I haven't had any food, actually, 0 calories. And I went to the gym and I did my squats. I did some pull-ups. I had some coffee, and I like my coffee decaffeinated, because caffeine is fine, but ultimately too much caffeine is not good for you. It messes with your sleep so that you cannot recover after your workouts. So yeah. Yeah, I was showing Corey the Alpha Brain. So Alpha Brain, I just use it to to stay in focus, so to speak. And you can actually go to YouTube and look at the Alpha Brain review and to see what it has in it and how it helps for the memory to stay more dynamic and just more elastic, and what drives the focus. So there are some there are nicotinic receptors in your brain that one of the compounds that Onnit formulation has that actually will stimulate your brain similarly to how nicotine stimulates the brain. So it can act as a nicotine desire suppressor, and at the same time boost your memory and kind of like overclock your brain a little bit without causing major issues that nicotine would potentially cause. So definitely recommend it. That's I still have it. It's right here, still on my desk. Yeah. So this thing I also like. It's called True Niagen, and what this does, that helps your body to produce more ATP, and ATP is the currency of energy for your cells. So our cells, they have mitochondria, and mitochondria are those respiratory engines that allow cells to function optimally. And so this True Niagen, it's actually that's their kind of like commercial name, but in reality, if you look at what it has, so it's nicotinamide riboside, basically. Nicotinamide riboside chloride. So what that does, that somehow stimulates the ATP production so that your cells are actually more energized. And that basically means that you can do more impactful exercises in the gym and not get as tired. And also not as much tired in your brain as well, because when we're tired, we we can't focus, we can't produce any meaningful work. We feel like we're working long hours, but in reality, we're effective as if we're working half an hour. So that's why like doing most of the creative work in the morning is actually more effective than in the evening, unless you optimize your body really well. So, oh yeah, thanks for tweeting that longevity routine. I don't even remember what I tweeted. So
cool. Yeah, that's super interesting, and that's one thing that we haven't covered a whole lot on this channel before, is what specific things do people use other than. I have a couple tips that that you might find interesting. So the reason why omega 369 is so useful to the brain is because it helps insulate the electrical wires, and specifically that's the material that's needed to create the myelin sheath, right? That insulates the neurons. Surprisingly to me, like 25% of the weight of your brain is supposed to be this electrical insulation, this omega-3, and many people are deficient on it. It's sometimes called fish oil, and it's not expensive. It's widely available. And I'm like a huge proponent of it, because when I was working in a Medicaid clinic for 7 years doing mental health and substance abuse therapy, and working with people who were 90% of my clients were court ordered to be there, I had really a lot of life circumstance problems. And one of the ways that I discovered was super effective in changing people's behavior was for them to have to contact success with this this taking omega 369 once a day. And it's like a interesting enough story about how it works in the brain, and like most people can understand that if you plug in your cell phone and the wire isn't insulated, then you could shock yourself, or the electricity could leak out, and electrical wires need to be insulated. Most people can really grasp that concept. And personally in my life, I had already made it most of the way through grad school without really having any major problems, so to speak. But when I started taking omega 369, it really changed my own experience of how easy it was to do tasks that were boring to me, or then I really started to grow more as a person, partially because probably of the benefits of omega 369 at a psychophysiological level, but also because I was practicing other healthy behaviors, such as tiny habits, and really taking baby steps, and just practicing behavior change. If you can notice a difference in the clarity of your thinking when you start taking omega 369, then it gives you motivation to work on the next thing. And so that's one that I recommend to people, because it also omega 369 is used by your body not only to insulate the electrical wires, but to be like the cushioning in your knees and stuff. So there were clients I had that their joints, some people's joint pain went away because of taking it. And there were, out of probably a low number of hundreds of people who ended up, who I encouraged to take this this omega. There were a couple of people even who went from being homeless to getting straight A's in community college. And it's just so inspiring to hear those stories. So
yeah, that's amazing. So lion's mane is known to improve myelination of the brain as well. So the white matter, what makes brain look white, is actually that. So lion's mane is definitely should be part of anybody's longevity arsenal.
The other thing that I found that made such a big impact on my own health, that I can't stop raving about it, and it was like a noticeable effect. Like that's kind of if I'm gonna teach people about health stuff, I like to practice what I preach, and I like to see that that it's a noticeable effect. And it's called a Philips deep sleep headband. And before I was a mental health counselor for 7 years, I worked in a neuroscience laboratory for 7 years, where we did lots of like really innovative stuff and measured brain waves of people. And so this device, unfortunately, recently stopped being manufactured. And so I hope maybe one day I will, I'll make the right connections and be able to, start getting these things produced again. But it's basically the way that it works is it measures what stage of sleep you're in using two different electrodes, a dry electrode on the front and another one that is a gel electrode. And because it can tell when your brain is trying to go into deep sleep, it plays just the right audio tones that it can read are helping your deep sleep. And so it's like slow wave sounds allow memories to get backed up better in the brain and allows better sleep efficiency, because when when your memories are trying to be backed up, they have to go from the hippocampus to the prefrontal cortex and then back to younger hippocampal cells. And so it's having those sound waves to ride on top of, literally, is something that works. It's shown in sleep research, and it's, in my opinion, super underrated as a way to prevent Alzheimer's. For me, I don't have to sleep as long in order to get to wake up, and I know the instant I wake up, whether it disconnected in the night or not, because that's how much more refreshed I feel. And so I'm hoping that these you could still sometimes find them on eBay for $200 to $400, and but it's something that I'm hoping can resurface at some point in the future, because I think it's another example of how longevity can be used. And I've even had this idea going for 5 or 6 years, ever since I got into Bitcoin. I'm like, it would be really cool to use contingency management as an extension of crypto, because when people pay themselves, or sorry, when somebody else pays you to change your behavior, the research, it shows that that's a stronger effect size than talk therapy, which is the thing that's used the most often. And so there's this huge benefit that I think people could get from developing certain things in crypto to where you behavior lock your crypto, your HEX, instead of just time locking it. And you're paying yourself to wear the deep sleep headband, or you're paying yourself to quit smoking, go to the gym, take omega-369, whatever it is. I know, Jack, we touched on that somewhat when we were doing our Twitter Spaces that one time. What thoughts do you have? I know I just rambled for a long time. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so I use the Aura ring that measures my sleep, and I find it very useful. And ultimately, I think getting to bed earlier is a key to really being an effective human being the next day. There's really nothing that needs to stop you except your inability to be disciplined and going to bed a little bit earlier when you're really tired and you need to get your sleep. So I just hear it from all of my friends. As soon as they started going to bed earlier, they just feel so much better. So sleep is when we recover. We absolutely need it. There's so many processes that are happening in the brain and the nervous system and the body that that help us function better. Specifically during the day, we accumulate a lot of oxidative damage, and one of it is H2O2, which is literally hydrogen peroxide. So hydrogen peroxide is mostly cleaned out during your deep cycles of sleep, where you have a lot of glutathione released, and glutathione binds with H2O2 and just creates H2O, which is just water. And H2O2, an excess amount of that actually is a neurotoxin. So it will absolutely destroy your brain circuits if you don't sleep. So that's why sleeping longer, or at least having the proper cycles, at least 4 cycles during the nighttime, is vital. When you wake up, if you see any sort of light outside, you should definitely come outside or be exposed to give yourself the proper sync of your circadian rhythms, so that I believe I read a study where if you open your eyes at the time when you wake up, the clock starts for your body literally to start secreting melatonin 16 hours after.
Yes.
So melatonin is what makes you sleepy. But if you wake up too late and you're not exposed to the light, so the melatonin does not come out in the same amounts, even though it's dark outside. So that's why. So like a lot of people, they try to avoid blue light in the evening, but it is just much better to be exposed to the blue light earlier in the morning rather than avoiding it in the evening. And a lot of times it's unavoidable because we have screens around us or whatever, right? And we have a lot of artificial light that's of a wrong frequency. So your body may end up being messed up. But in the morning, if you wake up, get exposure, then you set your circadian rhythms properly.
I think that, part of my philosophy in crypto is that we shouldn't just be looking for quote unquote like people who are ready. And part of that is because of my experience with working with people who changed their behavior, even though they didn't want to. And then they were like super happy that they were able to do that. I really see, the world as a place where when we create the right monetary environment, when we create the right kind of like social groups, even if it's us 3 talking here on YouTube and having, 4,000, 5,000 people watch during the next week. We're creating part of the social environment that is healthy for people because they're learning about the right things. And so I really think that, that there's a huge prospect of being able to merge like crypto and behavior change, but I'm not exactly sure what the next step is.
Well, I think the next step is to create an environment for mass adoption. So because crypto itself has no value unless you can apply this value beyond the speculation. So because what speculation is a conversion from US dollars to crypto and back. And that's what creates price instability. So, and that's one of the, I guess, truisms of economic power or any economy. So if we somehow look towards greater world adoption in terms of crypto being accepted as a legal tender, then ultimately it will reduce the instability of the value in itself, because there will be less and less of conversion from dollars to crypto and back. So, and inflation by itself, world inflation, is not necessarily bad. What's bad is price instability, right? Because price instability literally makes the economy inefficient, and there's some winners, but there's less of them than there are losers when the inflation causes instability within the marketplace. Like, for example, Taiwan cannot make enough chips for the cars, and so we can buy cars here. That gives wrong incentives to the dealers to jack up the prices by 25,000 per car. So, and some people are simply priced out of the markets. So that's why I think the reason why crypto is just so hyper when it comes to value is because of it's mostly treated as speculative asset. And I'm looking forward towards the time when the programmable money actually achieves the full synchronicity with the blockchain's first principles, which should include world adoption when it comes to conversion of the value stored on blockchain into the goods and services that people can get.
I mean, when I think about what behavior change HEX allows people to do, being used as a tool to delay gratification, it is an example of behavior change, because I know I would not have the same amount of HEX today if I didn't have the tool to be able to time lock it. I think I see David shaking his head.
Same here.
Same.
100%. The ability to stake HEX saved me from selling too early.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that's a cool feature. That's, and I mean, there's been stories of people like not committing suicide because they had staked HEX and also had other things that came together in their lives at the right time in terms of sober social support and, different activities to address depression, address relationships and certain circumstances. And I recently took that one step forward and agreed to like pay people like a really small amount of my Pulse points. Like once Pulse comes out, I will be paying to whoever signed the first 100 people who sign up to like write their own suicide prevention plan. And I launched this like right when Celsius and whatever it was before that were starting to like crash, and there were people tweeting like, oh, I can't go on and that sort of thing. And every time I talk about this, I kind of have to give the disclaimer, I can't be your individual therapist for, because I can't practice across state lines and I have my own time and personal boundaries, but I've created this blog post that leads people to a Survey Monkey where they get the information they need to call a suicide hotline, and they get the opportunity to write like a 3-sentence suicide prevention plan so that they can qualify for the airdrop that I'll do, the manual airdrop that I'll do to people. And so prior to this past week, we had already had 12 people sign up and create a plan. And so whether HEX has a emergent property of being a life extension technology, or whether we have to like manually make it one, I think that there are people in this community who are wanting to play around with it and to see what are all the use cases. How can we be known for trying to promote the right behaviors in crypto when most people are just worried about price appreciation? There probably is more of a use case beyond that. I think it'll be interesting to see, like you say, with mass adoption, if there will be some certain like gamified approaches to onboarding, or you get a special badge on your Twitter if you teach people about HEX or something. One thing, Jack, that I would love to see at some point would be if you ever get a chance to stream with the Staker app team, specifically Steph, who is an ex-Google employee who did really well there. He has spent the past 2 years creating this gamified system for HEX that we refer to as the League system. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't. I heard of a person, just not of the gamified league method.
David, do you want to explain what the Staker app leagues are?
Yep. So very simply, based on the number of HEX TShares that you have, which is based on how much HEX you've staked and for how long, you get ranked in a league, and they're actually ocean like creature themed. So if you don't have any HEX stakes, you're a silent shell. And then, oh man, am I gonna mess this up live? I forget what the second one was. A cool crab, and basically, the more HEX stakes you have, the higher in the ranking system you are. And in the app on the phone, you can see how many people are in each league. So it starts with like Poseidon, then there's whales, sharks, dolphins. Here we go.
Oh
This
yeah,
is a little bit outdated. They updated.
I actually did see it. Now I remember the words.
Yeah, so this was like the first instance of somebody in the HEX community gamifying how many HEX stakes you have, how much TShares you have.
Makes sense. Very cool. Yeah, amazing
and
stuff.
they've been they've the next version of the app that they have been working. I mean, this was created back when David and I first got in like this first 6 months or first 9 months of HEX. This is what like motivated all of the OGs to realize that TShares were valuable. And because back then the APY wasn't very high, it was like 5 or 10%, and the price swings were so much that we weren't really convinced that staking was the best approach for like the majority of our tokens. And so, and for the record, I'm not a super shark, but I took the screenshot when I had highlighted that. But anyway, Staker app is, they've showed some previews of a much more advanced gamification system for HEX that will be released. They just said at the conference it'll be released before PulseChain. We don't know how soon, but that's the latest word from Staker app. And I mean, they break these leagues into sub leagues. They reward people for all kinds of behaviors other than just how many TShares you've staked. And I'm really excited to see how that plays out, because I think that the way to get more adoption could be through gamification. What's your take on how gamification and/or NFTs could be somehow integrated with HEX?
Well, I think playing games is definitely fun, and it's definitely attractive. So one of the ways that I have seen NFTs implement game mechanics is that an NFT that you hold can actually generate yield in ERC20 token, and that ERC20 token can be used to make badges or unlock badges that are NFTs. So HEX could potentially be used as a currency to unlock an NFT badge of honor you're holding. And because it's all on chain, and we know when you started your stake and what period you've been staking for, your NFT perhaps could you could have a chest of NFTs that you can show off as a as your achievement leaderboard. And it is possible that you could trade those NFTs for maybe more HEX, or somebody may want to collect. Like for example, an early staker will have something very, very epic level NFT that could be an interesting collectible item that that person can, for example, put up for sale, and then 30% of it will be donated to the foundation of the choice, or it could be encoded with the contract too. So that could be one way to gamify and attract more market participants.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's I mean, people could even code something like that to reserve part of the interest that is paid on the HEX stake in order to incentivize, or reward really some other additional behaviors, such as, if you onboard 2 people and you serve your time, then you unlock, you're kind of like willingly at the beginning saying like, I'm willing to take a 10% cut from my yield if I don't do this other behavior, or something like that.
Right. Well, it doesn't need to be taken away. Like the scorekeeping, like there could be a completely adjacent NFT contract that you can interact with by presenting the date of your stake, as well as how many TShares you're holding, and when you interact with this new contract, it will actually mint new NFT for you. And it will have like maybe letters or numbers that are showing that this is what you have, and this and that. Or it may not have that. It may just be some sort of fun representation of you being a long-term staker, or that you have passed a certain stage of staking, perhaps, right? And then those things can be traded in a game. Maybe those NFTs can generate their own tokens that could have its own interesting value.
Mhm.
So
I know.
So I have about a few more minutes left
Sure,
before before my family is gonna try to unlock, gonna cut my internet because I promised to have dinner soon. So maybe one more question.
David?
Oh, geez. I mean, I'm going to be selfish about this real quick, if you don't mind, because I'm planning on being one of the validators on the Pulse chain. I'm going to run one of the 33 servers that everybody can vote for the proof of stake, right? Because basically, with Pulse chain and versus Ethereum, we're getting rid of the proof of work, and we're switching to proof of stake. And we're going to have 33 validating servers, and everybody can go to the website and you can vote using your Pulse, and top 33 basically win. So basically, I just, I don't know how long you've been out of the game. I don't know when the last time you were actually in the data center or in the rack was. But I kind of wanted to pick your brain about, I guess if I only get one, is just for DDoS attacks and for distributed, denial of service attacks. Is there any piece of technology today that you would recommend potentially employing to protect my IP address from being attacked and taken offline?
So Cisco has a product, and there are some non-Cisco vendors as well. They basically will insert delays into the TCP IP stream so that the denial of the service attack is ineffective. So, and there are patterns that they can recognize, and it's a piece of hardware that literally sits between your data center's open ports and the rest of the network. So it's quite often used to mitigate denial of service attacks by literally inserting delay into the TCP mechanisms. There's things with cookies that you can do. So basically, a proxy that starts generating cookies that require validation from the attacker, which they will not be able to do. So that's how the system can detect the real traffic from not real traffic.
Okay, excellent. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I just want to say, as you're the guy who basically built the first Google server rack in existence, right? Which is in the museum now.
That's right, JJ rack. There's a reason why it's called JJ.
Why is that?
Jack.
Oh, it's just because your name is Jack.
So I ran out of letters. I used to label them A, B, C, D, all through Z, and then I ran out of, they delivered like 50 more racks. So I went with AA and BB and CC, and then it was AB, AC, AD. So a permutation of the characters. And JJ just happened to be one of the racks that I installed, and I actually cut my hands on it, so it has some of my blood. So if anybody wants to clone me, they can go into the Computer History Museum and steal. Maybe they can steal the JJ27, and that's where my DNA is.
Oh man, that's the true sign of an IT guy, is when you get all sliced up in the rack. I actually cut my arm the other day when I was in a rack.
Yeah,
so
there's a scar here somewhere.
That's right. Yep, they bite, man. I tell you, the cage nuts and this little sharp metal bits in there, and you're trying to fiddle with wires. So yeah.
Well, those servers, they had no cases because Larry Page decided that we shouldn't be spending $250 on times 2,000 just because we wanted to run a case. So all of them were open, and they were sitting on what we call cork boards. And cork board was the insulating material that wouldn't short circuit the chips on the motherboards. They were just sitting on top of them. Yeah, if you look at them and you see how messy they are, because there is no chassis for those servers. They're just empty motherboards.
Wow.
And they were all connected to the single. There were 4 motherboards on what we call a pizza tray, and they were powered by a single power supply that would connect to all 4.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So many times when I would move them around, because they were so non-standard, I would end up hitting the power button on the power supply and just turn off all 4 servers. They would all crash. But no big deal, because it's only 4 out of like a million, so it's okay.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Thank you. I don't want to take any more of your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being on the show for so long. You rock. We really appreciate you.
All right, guys, tweet me, DM me, and Matty, we should definitely, and David, we should collaborate. Feel free to ask me any more questions. But let's obviously, stay aligned and stay in touch.
We'll be here
Sounds
for
great.
15 years.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Jack, take it easy.
Bye.
Wow, that was super cool, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for all the nerds out there, he's a legend, man. I mean, he built Google with his bare hands, like literally. That's something special.
And to have somebody who is so early into Bitcoin, who has created successful companies and now is super interested in HEX, and not just like, hey, I'm a billionaire and I want to get rich and rack 'em. This is somebody who is bringing the ethos that I think you and I stand for more.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of guy who's like, he's actually in it for the tech. You know what I mean?
Yes.
No joke.
Yes. Wow. Super incredible. And then we also had the news today on this show that somebody had donated $150,000 to the Sense Legal Fund because of, their awareness of the issue and all that kind of stuff. And, David has been working behind the scenes and in front of the scenes here in small and big ways that have been helpful to the cause. So I appreciate having our longevity alliance here.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, somebody's got to do it, right? It's got to be us,
Yeah. So this is certainly been a interesting discussion, and there were so many questions that we I think both wanted to ask Jack, and it strikes me that he may continue to be around in the space for quite some time to come, and so we always welcome people who have a good energy and are in it for the tech. Like I said before, you can find his other episodes that he's done. He's been on like a media blitz here in the HEX community, and went on some smaller and now bigger streams, and is just out there educating people. Just to kind of summarize like some of the topics that he talked about with Corey.
I watched that today as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah. CoreyCosta has like an underrated show for sure, and does a great job with it. So I took some notes here, and like just kind of to reiterate what some of this he shared on our stream today, and some kind of like was we didn't touch on, but why is he in HEX? Fair question. New guy shows up and goes on all the streams like, what are your intentions with my daughter, sort of thing,
Yeah, what are you trying to shill? Where's the ulterior motive? Now notice tonight he didn't shill a single thing, by the way.
Correct. So some of the reasons that he's given for being involved with the HEX community is that he sees HEX as standing for education, whereas other communities are not necessarily so education focused. He identifies that HEX is well designed. It's transparent. It's got on-chain, on-chain volume, and encourages self-custody, right? And that's something we didn't touch on, is that in a lot of coins, the way you would get yield is by providing liquidity, which then kind of like is a different set of pros and cons for people and for the token in general. In HEX, it's more profitable to stake usually. And so part of the design of HEX, offering yield to people who stake longer and diluting people who hold liquid and paying people who are holding up the price and all that, it's part of the design encourages self-custody. Whereas CeFi has just almost ruined the name of crypto recently. And then he also mentioned that it's like associated with like a positive human reward is another thing that he identifies HEX as. He said that the community is transparent and honest, not just in it to get rich, but like honest about like, sure, yeah, we'll get rich. Like that's cool. But he sees HEX as being primarily hated because Hexicans are not shy about calling out scams and how everyone else is just there for the money. He also mentioned like this concept of part of the game theory of a good crypto would be something that has a better Nash equilibrium, to say that and one way to describe that is that no player should take so much of the winnings that other people can't win. We see HEX is a super good example of that compared to the other cryptos that exist.
Especially with the founder. Right.
Oh yeah.
And also, I think part of the reason Jack loves HEX or is starting to love HEX is like he said, those crypto first principles. Hold your own coins. It's censorship resistant, and these are public functions, right? Anybody can run the blockchain. Anybody can verify it. This really is like almost like a public good, if you will, sort of, as long as you have access to the blockchain. Because that is really what Richard brought to the table. Richard learned all this in 2017, 2018. We watched HEX be born online, and here it is. So now you've got guys like Jack who are legends, and they're seeing it, and they're figuring it out immediately, right? Like, and here's Jack. Now he's streaming with everybody. He streamed with Richard. He was on the conference. Like, he got it real quick because he sees that this checks off all the boxes of what crypto's supposed to be.
Yes. Totally. Yeah, the first principles of crypto is aligned with HEX. Another thing he said is that HEX is the underdog, and that he kind of sees himself as being interested in helping to get the word out. We need help. We do need help getting the word out. We need help from people who are taking it maybe more seriously than than the outrage marketing. And we addressed that earlier. People can rewind if they want to hear more about my gripes. And
we could touch that for one quick sec, because if Richard's out there listening, my only recommendation would be, as far as the Red Bull content is concerned, if you know what I'm saying, I would shelf that, because I think that particular outrage isn't working. Just in my opinion, I don't think it's getting anywhere. So I would shelf that. I would recommend he keeps spicing up his outrage. It should be something different every time, almost like, try new gimmicks and new shticks, because some of these current ones I don't think they're working. They're really not.
And, when people have pushed back on it before, he's said, well, look at my follower count increasing. I think that that's not an isolated variable, that he hasn't done enough back and forth testing, nor necessarily should he. And of course, like, we don't want to tell him what to do. He's a billionaire. He created it. He made us rich. At the same time, if we are going to be the ones that get the majority of people to adopt HEX, and we don't expect him to do the work, then when he does weigh in on HEX. And when he does make appearances, especially internal, like, he made the point at the conference that when Sticker Guy was like, hey, you want to come on my channel? Like, you're here. And Richard was like, well, being here is kind of like already enough, because he wants to market to people outside of the community. But then he did the outrage marketing at the event that he said that he pointed out was more internal. So there is a discrepancy there that was, kind of shocking and embarrassing for us. And I predict that not only is it going to be that more people will step forward to represent the HEX brand if there's not if it's not tied to like a PP, sexuality, outrage marketing type stuff, but also it's like you have to ask, like, what kind of people are you attracting, and isn't it relevant that, sure, Suzu and like 3 Hours Capital and Machinsky and all those, like, yeah, they got more followers than he did, but they bribed their way to get those followers. They wrecked their followers. And aren't we here for a more long-term approach than that? Don't we value the lower number of followers that we have that are higher quality, onboards? So it's not just a numbers game. And we've seen that because Richard has demonstrated so much good behavior in promoting mental health at times, but then there gets to be a conflict of the different styles that he's using, I think, and can be upsetting to those of us who are trying to make HEX a family affair, for sure.
Yeah, trying to cast a wider net in society, and the Red Bull content ain't gonna pull, man. Like it's not gonna attract a lot. And as far as like Richard's analytics, I don't know if he's looking at his own analytics. I don't know if he's measuring how many engagements he's getting per tweet. I would be very curious to see what kind of Richard Hart content gets the best results. Because I'm sure there's tools out there that could be, run against his account. And
he's used some of that and shown it to us. But again, it's like, how much would he be growing just because the community is out there versus and how much is coming just automatically from the roll off of, like, when you sign up for Twitter. And I've observed this. I know it, like, I have a hot take on how you get followers on Twitter is by propagating an echo chamber. Like the second most popular person in HEX next to Richard Hart automatically gets, like a majority of the follows that Richard gets, because people don't follow people based on what tweets they make. They follow people based on when they sign up for their account. The first person they follow then determines what the next 20 recommendations are. That, like, there's a batch button nowadays. I don't know if you started a new Twitter account recently, but like no. When I go to my Twitter analytics, like, dude, even the stuff I have that Richard retweets, and it could get 500 likes and I would get one new follower, even though 100 people went to my profile. So like, either I'm doing something like super wrong in my profile, which I don't think I am, or that's just not, even though I'm out there following people based on looking at their profile and stuff, like, that's a very atypical behavior. The majority of follows come from how associated you are with the other people that are being followed. That's why Elon Musk has millions and millions of followers, is because he already achieved like the first mover advantage, network effect type thing. And we're seeing with like Twitter Spaces that if you use the funding gym approach, you like do a really good job of representing yourself and like spend a lot of time being one of the speakers. That's one way that people are like starting to add people based on, oh, I'll just add all the speakers. But I think that there's tips and tricks about how to get more followers. but unfortunately, there's a little bit of a clash there, because if you want more, if you want more followers in Hex, you need to like get more retweets from the hexologist and Richard. Like that's the way. But that's not going to get more outreach. That's not going to be marketing Hex to outsiders. It's only going to create like more, for many people, subconscious incentives to turn inward to the community and be marketing yourself to the community instead of to the outside world. And so there's kind of a little trap there in general that I think that is relevant to address.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, this is not an easy problem to solve. I mean, marketing. I'm no marketing expert by any means. I know nothing about marketing, so, but I know it's not easy. You know.
Yes. Yeah, and again, I will I will validate what Richard says about that he ran into a roadblock even advertising himself, not even advertising Hex, but that experience could be overcome by having the right team of people. Definitely. And not taking that one experience and overblowing it, because I think that really gives him a lot of justification for doing the Red Bull stuff, and he cites that a lot. But we know that people are influenced by not just outrage, but by puppy dogs, and so go back to those same advertisers or go to different advertisers and say, I'm premiering this new show on YouTube where it's Richard's next top dog, and each week there's an episode that comes out, and it's like he's going through the selection process of like, which puppy am I going to adopt, like, and tell me that people are not going to people are going to be unwilling to put billboards up about that or to run advertising around that. I'd be way more shocked, and I think it's worth a shot that there are other ways to break through. And we've already seen that there's a huge amount of synergy with like dogs and crypto and Elon Musk and like, so like Richard gave the advice at the conference, like, take a look at what's working out there and then do that. He was talking to us. And I think that, that is good advice. So the more that, and, so I see it both ways. I see like he definitely has his reasons for like pursuing that type of marketing. And like, we've benefited from it and also been embarrassed by it. And like, it's not all about us, the people who are already in, but at the same time, if the goal is for the community to be doing the majority of the outreach, then having kind of like inappropriate, appeals to the inappropriate is going to just create gatekeeping of a different form, I think.
Yeah, I would expect so. If me and hexologists start replicating with Red Bull tactics, I don't think we're going to get a lot of success. It's just gonna look good. Even it'll look worse than the whole community. Yeah, I think it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, and so so I think that we're all trying to like understand how our marketing can be better, how we can be supportive of Richard and like his brilliance, and to try to contribute all the ways that we can, to not expect him to do all the work, but also like not make it so that he's stopping us from doing, like, I almost got canceled by my family for that.
Yeah, I faced palm too, man. When I saw it happen live, dude, I couldn't believe it.
So so that being said, I think it's a topic that we can all continue to understand and work on. So
yeah, I think it's a phase. It'll pass once PulseChain's out and we're in the bull market, and it's like next year or 2024. This will all be behind us. Nobody will even remember it happened, probably. Because I think once PulseChain comes out and once we're out of the bear and once economic macro revives, we're in it's a whole new world. But probably 2 years from now. Take some time, but we'll get there.
Well, but if people like me get canceled and I have to choose, do I want my family or do I want to stream? It's like, that sucks. So it better really be working, to put those of us in that, like I said, I could have lined up behavior experts who, and people from like the NIH and different stuff like that. But people like that can't participate. So there is a cost to the outrage marketing. There is.
Yeah,
so
it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
yep, it cuts both ways.
We need to rerun the calculus on like what are we representing as a community, and it's okay if we don't all agree. It's like there will be conflict, and like we should do everything we can to like rise above it. It's like support free speech and like not shame anybody for their tactics and not think we know it all. We all need to think about what our brands are representing, and so I want to represent HEX. I want to represent like mental health. I want to say nice things about the founder but at some point at some point the calculus changes for me as a broadcaster to where like, well, maybe and I don't want to take a break. Like I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing, but like I do have a breaking point as well. So anyway, like hopefully we can, but he's like doubling down on it recently. So
yeah.
Maybe we'll come back to that in the future and see how it progresses. Another thing that Jack Levin said that seemed prescient to me, it had to do with Sutton-Wells syndrome. And besides from his personal disclosure that mushrooms worked for him, he didn't say what kind, but
psilocybin.
Yeah, I think we understand that.
Yeah.
His other advice was don't take the gains too seriously. If you can, treat it like a game if that helps, and remember that you worked hard for it in some cases, and to try to give back through education. I think those are all really cool points about Sutton-Wells syndrome.
Definitely, I definitely prescribe to the treat it like a game, and the number on the screen, like even to this day, it's like it's not real. I don't treat it like real. It hasn't I haven't let it affect my day-to-day life. You know what I mean? Like I'm still the same guy. Like I drive the same car. I do the same job at work. I'm I hang out with the Hexkins. I'm just a normal dude. It's don't let the numbers in your staker app influence how you behave. Unless it's positive. I mean, I'm saying in good ways, but I prescribe that. I think I like that. Just treat it like a game. How many points can you rack up in there? But in the end of the day, it's not what life's all about. This is just money's just part of life. It's just a tool that we use to do commerce and trade with each other for goods and services. That's it. It's not the end all be all. Even Richard's outrage tweet, I think it was yesterday, like having the most money makes me the best person. Like obviously it's meant to be triggering and it's meant to be untrue, right?
it sure riles people up and increases attention and it's, marketing and communication are complicated topics that
yeah, that's like engagement bait or clickbait, which
good point.
Like even that kind of tactic, I thought that was, even I retweeted that. I knew it was untrue. I didn't agree with it on a personal level, but I knew that would trigger some people and people would disagree and they'd start commenting. And then that's how you're just like casting, it's like fishing.
Yeah. We gotta be careful what behaviors we're like promoting but also not take it too seriously. Like you said, like treat it like a game and don't be like, I'm trying to stay away from like holier than thou. Like, I'm not trying to tell people how to act and stuff. People could probably see my genuine conflict when they've heard me say like, oh yeah, like Red Bull's fine, that's cool, and then like now I'm like, no, it's not cool. And I am not the only one who decides whether it's cool or not, but for me it's gotten to be too close to home. Let's put it that way. So another thing that here's like, I think one more point is this idea Jack talked about, like an equation that he has for valuing crypto and seeing it as a function of adoption, like in terms of where's the world economy, how much inflation is there in crypto, and then what's the difference between the two multiplied by the number of users. I had to like rewind that a few times and like try to get it all straight. But this is part of the idea that like value feeds upon itself to bring people in. And I think we see that. I think it's a different way to just break down what we already know and say. But it's cool that he like has letters and numbers and a little equation that he worked out for that. So all in all, I think Jack is looking to be a net positive for the space, and I can't agree more that education is it's a huge cornerstone. It's something that we're all working on together. When I was bringing up like the issue of hexagons, trying to capture ourselves as our main audience, I think that's, it's not my only goal. It's not like it's kind of just, it's more complicated than we're kind of breaking it down into. But I think that it's an important thing that hasn't fully been addressed yet. Is like, well, there are incentives to try to like we talked about with the Twitter. Like if you're higher up in the HEX ecosystem, then you get more automatic follows. Something
just to counterject. I don't know about you, but for me on my YouTube studio, the majority of the folks who watch my content are brand new viewers. I'd be curious to see what the historical is for Game Theory Gang over the last 16 weeks. You might be surprised. There's probably a lot more new folks watching every night, at least 50%. It's got to be. And then there are the OGs who've always been here. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of the HEX, community is that we are educated. We are the best of the best in crypto. You know what I mean? Like we've figured it out. We're leaps ahead of everybody. Even just Jack coming up to speed is a testament to that. Look what he was able to do in a couple of weeks. So, even the new folks here, I think we're bringing them up to speed real quick.
We'll have to look at the data, and that'll be curious to see. I think might be somewhere in between where both you and I like kind of are intuiting, and I think in general, one of the ways that this show supports HEX and the price and allows people to be onboarded is by not appealing to brand new people, but to keep old people engaged, and so that they can keep learning on the cutting edge, so that they don't go off and like spend all their HEX on the next shiny thing. You know,
Yeah.
we do a really good job of like covering what really deep topics in really long form. And I've been surprised when I go to HEX meetups that there's like super rich hexicans everywhere, and they all kind of watch the show. Even when I like was describing the ways that I did not tell Rackham how the ultimate game theory would play out with the OA joining the PulseChain sacrifice at the end, like I know he was listening because he blocked the shit out of me after I said that on the show. So like, well, maybe he like pays somebody to watch all the streams or something. But you know, like
he was watching. You know, he's watching.
But let me, you know, like remind even him that it's like that was the best game theory for like everybody, and it was proven really that wasn't kind of like unacceptable, because we saw like all the top 10 addresses for PulseChain sacrifice the same amount for PulseX later on. And so we know that those addresses like didn't have a problem with being diluted by the OA, which is fascinating game theory, never before done in economic history and that sort of thing. Super interesting. So you and I continue to cover some really, really interesting aspects of the HEX community that I think are so in depth that some people can get up to speed. But the target, I think, of this show traditionally has been keep the OGs like coming back, so that they don't, because basically if we made only content for new people, the old people would get sick of it and they would go learn about something else, which it's okay to some extent. But if you're going to learn about like other cryptos that are going to get you wrecked, that's not as good.
We keep the OGs up to date, right? Our show is, it's timely, it's relevant. We're talking about what's going on this week. Amazing guests every week. So like, this is like this is like your weekly news show almost.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that's but at some point, you know, it's relevant for everybody to do their part. We don't want to have a tragedy of the commons where somebody else has to onboard everybody, and the people who have got the most experience are like not doing their part. So for me, what that looks like is offering this chain analysis 101 course as an experiment for me to see how many people can be engaged by this new learning format. And so for everybody watching, go sign up now. There's like, I know I've been saying it's only a couple days that you have a window to sign up on Telegram, but go to pls.academy now, because eventually I will turn it off and won't care that people are complaining that they missed it. So by going to pls.academy, then it takes you to a Telegram group. Then you have to look at the pinned message and then join using that link to the actual Chain 101 class. We're going to be doing another episode, the third out of 4 episodes, tomorrow night live. You can watch on the replay. You can check out the awesome show notes that have lots of links and like demos on how to do stuff. Like the first 2 classes, I think that there were, I don't know, 100 people signed up. And now since the conference, it's over 420. So this is going to be really a cool experiment to see how much value we can create. And then after this one class wraps up, after the last Wednesday in July, then I'll have to make the decision about whether to offer like a paid course only, or to do a follow-up with like, there could be a paid course and a course that's still freemium type thing. But so far it's like, I'm going to have you do something. You're going to have to do something to participate, whether it's like take a survey or,
Proof of work of some kind.
Yeah,
Right?
do something.
Yep. That's good.
So we'll experiment with that and see if that's helpful to new people or old people or both. So sign up for that now before it disappears. And and David, you're gonna participate in that course. Is that right? You're gonna be a student.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a great topic, man. Like being able to read the blockchain and understand what you're looking at is critical. Like it's like reading English. You gotta start small, but once you get the hang of it, once you get the pace of it, then you could read anything on Etherscan. You could follow any transaction, and you'll be shocked at what you find out there. I'll tell you, it's cool. It's fun too. I love it as a hobby as well.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful.
Yeah, and we'll we've already been looking into things. I reported on this show, like one example of something we learned is that HEX it can be burned, and then there were so many smart people who joined and watched the second episode of the class where I went over burning and like Pulse Dogecoins, but they burned 50,000 of the coins that were originally created for liquidity. So that like checks out. You can see it. You can have the transparency that you want from an on-chain situation. You could see that somebody who might be me like burned one Pulse Dogecoin as like the first instance of a retail person burning one. But it is all these smart people joined, and then they actually corrected me that that there's more than one type of burning. So there are some contracts that have like an internal mechanism to burn so that it reduces the total supply that you see on Etherscan. And then there are other solutions to burning where you send to this famous Ethereum address, like 0x, and then all zeros until you get to like DEAD, like dead. And so there's more than one method for burning, and HEX can be sent to the dead address, but it still shows up in the total supply. HEX does not have, I suspect, the internal function to be able to run burning for particular design reasons. So that's a correction to like the previous update I made, and a good example of how like offering the course, teach is more and more stuff's getting discovered because of those materials. So
it's good stuff.
I had originally wanted to cover this with Jack, and I forgot, but also I'm glad we focused on the things we focused on. There's this post out here by the Otteroo, who's like this anonymous person on Twitter who calls out things that look like they're about to collapse, like correctly predicted Celsius. I should note that even though we didn't advertise it like too much. I mean, the reason I had Wendy's on, I booked him like 2 weeks in advance or something the first time because I heard he knew about Celsius. Like I was starting to see the writing on the wall with Celsius even before it collapsed. So this is like, here's your preview for another thing that is being posted about, and disclaimer is like, I can't necessarily tell people whether you should like freak out about this or not, but the whole point of this show is to just present the facts and let people decide for themselves. And this is not financial advice. You have to take responsibility for your own decisions. Like if you particularly susceptible to FUD and don't want to be, like, don't watch this part. But this is, there's some predictions that some people are making that there will be a bank run on USDT. So maybe David and I, before we wrap up the show, maybe we can give our thoughts on this whole situation as it develops.
Yeah, I could start if you like. I'll tell you what I know about Tether, and
Please.
then I'll just reference there's two guys on Twitter that I really enjoy. So TLDR, short story, back in 2016, 2017, there was Bitfinex, the exchange. They had a problem, like something, it was a hack or something bad happened. And it was basically, it was a shady exchange. Bitfinex is a very shady exchange. Long story short, guys from Bitfinex basically founded Tether. These known scammers, known bad guys. Now Tether is, they say they have a treasury. They say every Tether is backed by a dollar, but to this day, I don't believe they've ever produced any audit whatsoever or any proof. SEC's questioned them. It's very suspicious. It appears, and I agree with this sentiment, that they're just printing tethers out of thin air. There's no, I mean, it's fiat based on fiat anyway. So it's backed by nothing. In my opinion, there's no tether, there's no cash backing Tether. The big worry and the biggest proof that I see online that this is true is all the Bitcoin ETFs for the United States, they keep getting rejected. And in those rejection papers, it clearly states that like the SEC is scared of like the Tether exposure. Like basically the price of Bitcoin, the price of a lot of the cryptos have all been pumped because Tether produces, they print them out of thin air and they buy Bitcoin with them. So it's fake phony money basically. So I expect Tether eventually is going to collapse. It's just a matter of time. Could they go on for another 3 to 5 years? Probably. But if everybody, well, I mean, you could say that about anything. If everybody tried to withdraw at once, anything would collapse. That's true. But definitely, I do not trust these guys. It is highly suspicious. If you wanted to compare US Tether versus US dollar coin, I would say US dollar coin from Circle every day of the week because they do their monthly audits and you can see that they're holding cash and bonds. So I don't like Tether. I don't use it. I don't hold it. And even all the ETFs for Bitcoin get rejected because of it.
So I used to take the other side of the argument, and I used to say, you know, shadow banking is a thing. Like people outside of the financial system do have real money. And just because you're auditing something just because you're not auditing something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And there was I read the some of the stuff that this whistleblower had written, who named themselves Bitfinex with an apostrophe D on the end. And back in 2017, 2018, and then there was a couple of researchers from University of Texas or something that published this super long report about why they thought that Tether was not backed. And I didn't think that they did a super good job necessarily because they didn't address the game theory aspect of if you're trying to create a new financial system that competes with the dollar, really is permissionless, then of course you don't want it to be audited, but that doesn't mean that it's not real. And so I kind of saw a potential for Tether to not be completely fraudulent. Now I'm kind of changing my tune. And it's because I've seen what Celsius did, what Three Arrows Capital did, what all these con artists did, is they tried to they tried to say that they had assets, but really those assets were, they gave them away to try to get yield. And so, and the assets themselves were tied up in the bull run and leveraged to the extent that they could be lost. And there wasn't proper risk management. And now when I think about the game theory of the crypto space, I think well, if they were already being blamed for like doing this, even though I think that they could have been solvent back in 2020, maybe 2021 during the bull run, they could have been solvent because they're taking these bets. They're making bets. You know, when Tether like lost the case, or like kind of got in trouble in New York, in the state of New York, for operating in a way that wasn't compliant with different regulations, they got fined like a very specific amount of money. It was like $15 million back in like 2019 or something. And the reason that the government chose that specific amount of money to fine them is because that was the exact amount of profit that they had made, even on like a small number of billions of dollars of volume. So like that seemed to me like, you know, if there was more money for the government to take, they would have, you know, like if so for me, I still saw evidence that Tether could, you know, be that it could be backed at that point. And I think there was like, you know, kind of the potential for a political agenda to be, you know, saying, well, the price of Bitcoin when it ran to 20,000 wasn't real because Tether was printing money out of thin air. And like, that just seemed, it seemed like there was real demand for Bitcoin. Like I was buying Bitcoin at 17,000. I was buying Bitcoin at 19, you know, I was dollar cost averaging in on that bull run. I know a lot of other people were. So I had trouble believing that all of the Bitcoin buy pressure was fake. I knew that Bitcoin miners were selling their virgin Bitcoins at a premium because people don't want the government tracking their Bitcoin and don't want all the regulations of like, you know, mixed coins and that kind of stuff. And so, so I think it was plausible that Bitfinex could have been, Bitfinex and Tether and all them like could have been backed, but there was evidence on both sides, obviously. Now, my take is that like, if they were being accused of that, if they were, you know, like forced to operate outside the legal system of, you know, they basically took up like the shadow banking market for crypto and, you know, went to all these alternative places to try to do their banking operations. And, you know, even when they got some money seized, it seems like they had raised it back and it, you know, still been okay. And, you know, why would all these warlords and like illegal people who are running businesses, why would they invest money in something that they knew wasn't backed? So like there was an argument to say that it was backed, but now it's like, well, where, you know, we still haven't seen all of the places that Three Arrows Capital borrowed their $4 billion from. It wasn't all from Celsius. You know, it wasn't all from BlockFi or wherever the other places were. And why wouldn't the creators of Tether end up getting corrupted to the point where because they were operating for so long outside of the financial system, they were thinking, well, you know, the next bull run, maybe they can say that they have commercial papers. This is the official term, the mysterious commercial papers. And that's a reference to like a particular type of asset class. Paper. What did I just say?
Commercial paper.
Commercial paper is like certain
bonds.
Types of corporate debt that may or may not be like traceable and that sort of thing. Like,
or government debt, right? Like bonds, government bonds, or exactly.
And so so like that still didn't convince me, but like now I kind of think like there's a good chance that Tether isn't fully backed, just because why wouldn't these people, if they weren't being forced to be honest, if they weren't having to show full transparency, eventually that they would start taking risky bets to make money on the side. You know, it's not fair. The government took their $15 million. So they're going to like, you know, next bull market, they're going to take a little bit more risk, get on the slippery slope. And I think now it's totally possible. And I think it's interesting because David and I messaged a couple of times on Twitter to like signal to each other that we would cover this topic. And, you know, like one point that you made, David, was that if enough people keep using it, maybe it won't fail. Yes. Depending on how much risk they took, though. And because we know that Three Arrows Capital just like blew up tons of places in the crypto space because they borrowed Bitcoin and then gambled it and lost it. And so,
yeah, like the unwinding of all that leverage. Yeah. There's one other source on Twitter that I follow. His name is Bennett Tomlin, and he's just a normal guy like us. He's a crypto guy. He's out here. You can see his picture. He does a podcast. They talk about this every week. They really do. I don't watch it every week because it's, you know, it's the same story. But like, I don't trust Tether as far as I could throw him, or Bitfinex. So my personal advice is for which one?
Bennett Tomlin.
Oh, BENNETT and then TOMLIN.
There we go. Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. So he's a cool guy. He does a good job. Very intelligent. Very they think a lot about it. And he's been covering this story for years. So he's kind of my go-to source. That's him. There's Bennett. So he's my go-to source in anything Tether or FUD related, because they're hot on the trail. It's just a matter of time. But yeah, if enough people keep using it and nobody withdraws back to cash and tries to redeem the Tether, if you think of it as a poker chip that you just use on like Uniswap, fine, fair enough, it works. But if everybody goes to the cage to cash out one day, it's game over. And we don't know when that game's going to be. And I don't want to play that game.
So to some extent, this would trigger like a potential liquidation event throughout much of crypto. It would wreck the price of Bitcoin and everything else.
Dude, Bitcoin will be like back to $2 or $3 grand. If Tether unwinds and goes to zero, that's $65 billion of value that vanishes.
And so one thing I find interesting, you know, a lot of times when everybody expects one thing to happen, something else, you know, the opposite happens. To temper this discussion and really prove that I don't know which way it's going to go. And this is part of the reason why we don't try to time the market. This, you know, like, you know, the market can be very unpredictable because there's so much money to be made from people trading, fearing the worst. And then it was just like a narrative that certain, you know, whales used to manipulate you into, you know, missing out on the next bull run. But let me still try to present, even if Tether is corrupt and it has, you know, embezzled and their commercial paper really was Three Arrows Capital that lost it all and all that. Let me still try to give you a scenario where crypto will still be okay, because my initial reaction was, oh shit, crypto's not going to be okay. Bitcoin will go to 11K. Bitcoin will go to 3K, like something. And so just to balance it out again, you know, if Three Arrows Capital did lose $4 billion worth of Bitcoin and Tether has a total market capitalization of $65 billion. Well, what is that? 5%, 10%, somewhere in there, like 7% of their balance. So if even 90% people try to cash out and they do have, and that's not how much liquidity that they would have, because the whole point of Tether being outside of the normal banking system is that it has to hold things that the government can't seize all in one go. So they can't have all their dollars in one bank. They have to spread it out in lots of banks. They can't have it all in banks. They have to have, that's why they have to have all these weird assets to spread the risk and hope that they don't fail and hope they don't get a big bank run. So we know that probably if they did lose the 4 billion or 4 billion worth, then what other, like how much of a bank run do you have to get before they become insolvent? And so another thing to point out is that if somebody lost $4 billion worth of Bitcoin, and then like now that could cause like maybe some buy pressure. I'm not sure about that, but like even if all these GOX coins come on the market, that's only 2 billion. So like if Tether has to like move around some of their money to rebuy Bitcoin to like defend the price, they might still be able to do that. If they were, even if they were under collateralized, even if they lost money with 3 Arrows Capital, even if they lost money betting on Bitcoin going higher than it really did, it's hard to say whether they're going to run into liquidity issues or not.
Yeah. And and like everybody listening out there, like don't trade on this advice. You know what I mean? Like, you won't know, like it's going to take a black swan to take down Tether, right? It's just going to be one day out of the blue, something we didn't see coming, if that day ever comes, and it might not. So man, it's sketchy though. Like, I mean, I'm not betting on it,
if Bitcoin insiders found a buyer for those GOX coins, then maybe this pump that we're seeing in Bitcoin and Ethereum in the past week of 25% or whatever, maybe that is real. The way that I'm looking at it is, it looks to me like a suckers rally, dead cat bounce.
Oh, this is a bull trap. Oh, 100% dead cat bounce bull trap. Well, yes, you said it. I could feel it in my bones. Like we could all feel it. All the OGs can feel it. Like this is a fake out. They get you long, and then we're going lower.
And so at the end of the day, I think most of us are not whales, at least in Bitcoin. Maybe some people out there listening are, but so us, in general, not playing whale games and not playing into the games that whales are creating to try to enrich themselves is one way to play it. And so for me, what am I doing? It's like prepare for either way, whether crypto goes to new all-time highs, HEX, or other cryptos, or whether the crypto market collapses and takes a long time to rebuild. For me, I have made sure that I took enough money out to pay my taxes for 2022, to to not have to sell if HEX goes to a penny. I don't want to have to sell at that point. And a lot of people have maybe positioned themselves to be able to defend the price if it goes lower by not being all in on something to where you can't handle a 6-month downturn, and you're having to sell it lower and lower prices. So for me, I've made like a minor adjustment this week. I've made a 5% adjustment in my liquid bag, which is like 5% of my total bag or something. So we're talking about like very small adjustments that I make based on all these types of things. So, I can tell people what I'm doing. I can't tell you what you should do. If the crypto market collapses, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to keep practicing mental health for myself, and, practicing what I preach, and preaching mental health. But I think it could go either way. I think it could just be fun. And I also think that it could be a setup where people know that these GOX coins are going to be taken off the market, and they're just kind of like not letting everybody know that, or Tether's going to collapse imminently, and who knows, and then that drags everything down with it. Either way, it'll create opportunities. It will reward the patient, and it's another situation where you can practice not just being a total degenerate trader and going like, I shouldn't like say degen. Like, look, some people, we had Dan on this show a few weeks back. Dan has played every one of his hands correctly. Like, he has a sixth sense when it comes to all this stuff. He like only trades 4 times a year, 6 times a year, like devotes an entire week to like deep diving into the market, like wrecking his own physical health to like stay up all night and practice, you know, like, and make the right moves for him. Other people such as myself, you know, like focus more on alternate strategies. And look, both can be winning strategies. But in general, HEX is designed for the people to have more passive income.
Yeah, I prescribe to that latter theory as well. You know, you just stake out your HEX. When your stakes come due, either sell the interest, sell it all, or re-roll it. That's it. Easy. There's no thinking. I don't have to time the market. I don't look at charts. I don't care. It's very easy, very simple. So there's a lot of ways to do it and win and be successful. You know, because it works. Either way works.
Oh shoot, somebody came in and said HEX is a scam. I guess we should shut down the channel forever or something, right?
Oh
like,
man, yeah, I gotta go turn off my validator, guys. Yep, it's over. You heard it here first. We're done. I should probably get this tattoo laser removed off my chest. Right? Oh god, like, what have I done? Damn, bro. Shit.
I wish I didn't get scammed into like being so financially well off, you know.
I know, me too, man.
To survive a whole bear market, that sucks. Wow.
Well, on that note.
Yeah. You know, we were going to wrap up this episode anyway because it's been 3.5 hours. That is just the right, like, hilarious note to end on. It's all over. HEX is a scam. But you know, needless to say, we will be back next week to keep looking for the evidence that it's not the goat of crypto. So anyway, you know, there's 2 types of people who get it now and people who are going to get it later on. And you know, so you know, with that being said, David, this week has been another example of just an amazing show. Can't thank you enough for participating, and it's been a true pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me as always, and shout out to our special guest Jack, who has been doing the rounds and doing a great job. I'm glad he's a Hexican. You know, we can welcome to the community. So good stuff.
Me too. Let me see. Why don't you pump your tell people where to find you while I find the ending screen.
Yep. Yeah. As always, you guys can find me at David Feeder on Twitter, at David Feeder on YouTube. And yeah, vote for me for PulseChain Validator. If you haven't tried out the testnet yet, please do so. You can go back to day 1 of the PulseConference.online conference and watch the demo that me, Maddie, and K4K Crypto did. Kind of broke it all down right there. Yeah, try it out. Get ready before it comes, because we don't know when, but one of these days, man, Richard's going to say it's 2 weeks away, and then he's really going to mean it. So get ready.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks, everybody. Oh, I never said, like, hit the like and subscribe button now. Please do it. And go in the show notes here and follow David Feeder on his YouTube and Twitter accounts. Follow Jack on his Twitter account, and we'll hope that he creates his own YouTube channel here one of these days. Sign up for the Chain Analysis 101 course. It should like magically pop up here in the last few seconds of the stream, or you can go to.
What time is that tomorrow night?
It starts, so like whatever time this show starts in your time zone, it's half an hour before that. So like in Central Time, 7 o'clock, Pacific, 5 o'clock, Eastern, 8 o'clock.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so people go to pls.academy, then go to like the pinned message to find the link to join the group. You do not have to put in your your transaction ID because we stopped verifying people manually because it was taking too much time. So for now, for a couple more days, you can just go, you click the link before the deadline and you're entered into the class, and then follow the pinned messages in the Chain 101 Telegram to see the YouTube video for the week that'll come out tomorrow. It'll come out, I'll post it 2 hours before we go live, and you'll be able to check it out there. So thanks everybody. And David and I will see you next week.
Yep. Have a good one, everybody. See you later.